What's up everyone, how are you all? Today we are back with another blazing Naruto story. What if female Naruto queen of Highschool DXD? If you enjoy then please like, share and do comments. Uzumaki Naruto didn't understand what was happening. It was a beautiful evening in the village of Konoha. The moon was full, the stars were shining. The wind was giving a gentle caress to the many citizens. He was running from angry shinobi. Wait, what? At the age of 4 years, Naruto was pretty fast. His short, sunshine blonde hair waving in the wind of his passing. Naturally spiking in every different way, it was as untamable as the boy who owned it. Dressed in simple charcoal-colored pants, a dark red long-sleeved shirt, and black sandals, Naruto kept running. Following hot on his heels through the streets and narrow alleyways of Konoha was a squad of what appeared to be Anbu covered in brightly colored paint. Then he ran into a pair of legs covered in a long skirt. Well shit. Era, Naruto-sama, where might you be heading to in such a rush? A kind and somewhat amused, not to mention distinctly feminine, voice asked. Looking up from his position on the ground, Naruto saw one of Caretakers, Uchiha Makoto. A beautiful woman, Makoto's long black hair was the envy of many other women in Konoha. Slightly tanned skin, light complexion, dark eyes, and zero applied makeup finished off this absolutely unique woman's face. Her dress was as simple as her appearance was not: ankle-length dark blue skirt, and pink turtleneck sweater, both of common homespun wool, and a pair of reed sandals. Altogether she was an enchanting image, and many a man cursed Uchiha Fugaku for having won the heart of such a woman. Unfortunately for Naruto, the current smile on her face expressed not merely amusement, but also the possibility of being deprived of his favorite food, ramen. Well, you see. I kinda, sorta, maybe. Paint-bombed Anbu headquarters again. He said in a rush, hoping that with the truth his ramen wouldn't be taken away from him. He really didn't want to go through withdrawal again. As he remembered the last time he angered Makoto, more of his caretakers started showing up. Along with the obviously annoyed Anbu members. First to arrive was another raven-haired woman, Kurama Yuhi. Lustrous dark hair fell in natural waves to just past her shoulders, tanned skin, fair complexion, and bright red eyes. This was Konoha's Ice Queen, and Genjutsu Mistress, and yet again a woman many men would kill to have as theirs. If Makoto could be described as mother, then this beauty was obviously elder sister. Respect her, she'll respect you, to an extent of course. Standing just slightly taller than Makoto, who herself stood just under 5.5 feet, Kurama cut an imposing figure in her Chunin uniform of dark red bodysuit and Chunin flak vest. Despite her air of seriousness though, you could easily tell she was trying not out laughing at the stunt Naruto pulled. Next, and thankfully last of his current caretakers, was one more woman. Ichiraku Ayame. Just 5 years older than Naruto, Ayame was a nice girl. Long brown hair kept away from her face by use of a bandana. A gift from her father Tuchi, who owned and ran Naruto's favorite ramen stand. Dark eyes in a slightly chubby face, the 9-year-old girl filled the role of playmate for Naruto today. Too bad that Naruto has a rather large problem with sitting still for any length of time, as Ayame was asked to help her father in the back of the ramen stand to get ready for the following day. She was even still wearing her work outfit of cream-colored baggy trousers and kimono top covered by an apron, so obviously she had lit out after him as soon as she noticed him gone. Probably hadn't taken very long. Naruto's personality is rather loud. Naruto, what did you do this time? Ayame wasn't quite shouting, but her point was easily made clear. Either he confessed and received a relatively light punishment, or he could try and weasel his way out of it and possibly be in a worse situation. He decided discretion was the better part of valor, but attempting fool Ayame was plain stupid. And so, like a wet house of cards, Naruto folded, revealing all he had been up to in the 3 hours since he gave her the slip. Setting off paint bombs in Anbu headquarters, shaving no less than 5 inmates of torture and interrogation bald without their notice, even managing to hit the Inuzuka clan compound with synthesized pheromones. How did he get that last one? It goes without saying that his caretakers and the Anbu were more than a little shocked at just how much he accomplished in 3 hours. Speaking of the Anbu, it was a full squad of 5 members. Each one arriving in descending order of rainbow colors. Not quite certain if that was intentional or not, no one there bothered to speak of it. The apparent leader, if arrival order was to be believed, was covered in bright red from the neck down, accentuating her obviously female form. Her cat-marked mask and short purple hair the only parts of her uncovered by the paint. The next 4 members were all male. Saru, monkey, in orange, Taka, hawk, in yellow, Kuma, bear, in green, and Iruka, dolphin, in blue. None of them seemed very happy, despite the fact you couldn't actually see their faces. They simply radiated ill content. All this, for a prank? Okay, 3 mid-range pranks in the same number of hours, but still. They were just pranks. Jokes. Aren't people supposed to laugh at jokes? This is what had Naruto confused. He was told that jokes were for fun and humor. Why wasn't anyone laughing? He did well, right? Expressing these thoughts out loud proved him correct, though when everyone else suddenly burst into what could only be termed as outright, gut-busting laughter. Anbu included, though they vowed to find ways to increase their headquarters' security so it couldn't happen again. Just like the last time. Heads hung in shame that they still couldn't stop one child from finding them and entering without notice. Naruto-sama, please refrain from such acts in the future. No matter how entertaining they might be, Makoto said in a voice that clearly stated she didn't believe he would actually comply with her wish. How did Naruto know this? She was smiling, and even still giving out the occasional giggle. He loved that laugh, that smile. He felt as though they were reserved for only him. Certainly her husband never made her laugh, not since he threw her out with their newborn daughter, named Tsukiko, 4 years ago, where she was taken in immediately by Naruto's birth mother, one Uzumaki Kushina, and Makoto's best friend. Naruto still didn't understand why Uchiha Fugaku would throw Makoto out just because she birthed a daughter instead of a son. It made no sense. She was his wife, someone he had vowed to love and honor. Instead, when she failed to bear the expected second son, Fugaku tossed her aside like a used rag. Thus is how Makoto and Tsukiko came to be in the service of the Uzumaki family. And even though Tsukiko was only 4 years old, she took what few duties she was given with a seriousness that belied her age. Like mother, like daughter in that respect at least. Serious about her duty. Poor girl. Tomorrow would be her day to try and keep Naruto out of trouble. Makoto suddenly felt some sympathy for her second child. Uzumaki Naruto was practically a force of nature. Stopping him was all but impossible. Diverting him, however, was fully possible. If he seemed bored, you had one of 2 basic choices. Either start running and hope he didn't feel like chasing you for giggles, or offer up some poor random person for his pranks. Makoto made sure Tsukiko was told of these options when the young girl was first given the task 6 months prior. Was it cruel to toss a random person into the path that is Uzumaki, Hurricane, Naruto? Yes. Will his servants continue in this pattern? Without question or remorse. Why? Because by doing so they spared the sanity of the masses dealing with a bored Uzumaki. Makoto shuddered. People thought Naruto was bad, they should remember his deceased mother. Kami, that woman could have had even the god Loki taking notes. She loved the woman like a sister, but did her son have to take after Kushina in that way? Looking at the now smiling young boy, she couldn't but think it might be for the best. It gave him a way to be close to Kushina, even if he didn't know it. That was something Makoto thought on as she, Kurenai, and Ayame walked Naruto away from the now amused Anbu after apologizing thoroughly and reassuring them that the paint would simply wash right off with some water. Uzumaki Kushina, Naruto's birth mother, died shortly after bringing Naruto into the world. Stress due to childbirth, they said. No one knew who his father was, but as Kushina had red hair and dark violet eyes, it could be said that Naruto probably looked a great deal like the man. Makoto had suspicions, of course. Blonde hair and cerulean eyes were almost unheard of, but with her primary suspect dead she could hardly confirm it. Feeling a tug on her left sleeve, she looked down into the troubled cerulean blue eyes of her master. Makoto-chan? Why do they stare at me like that? Naruto asked as he indicated the glares of hatred, resentment, fear, and mistrust being thrown at him by the passing civilians. It was nothing new, not really. He had noticed the stares some months ago, but didn't know what he did to deserve them. At the time he had simply passed it off as a reaction to his pranks, but then why the looks of hatred and fear? I believe it has to do with Kyuubi, Naruto-sama. They don't trust that you are as you appear. Makoto replied in a soft voice so only their little group could hear. The Kyubi, short for Kyubi no Kitsune, was a massive red-furred fox the size of a mountain, with 9 tails said to represent the power it held. It was said that a single swing of one of its tails could cause tsunamis or destroy mountains, and 4 years ago it appeared from nowhere to attack Konoha. The Yondaime Hokage, Namikaze Minato, utilized a powerful shinobi art called Fuinjutsu, the art of sealing, to lock the beast away. The problem lay in the fact that he couldn't use just anything to contain the fox. No, he had to use a child, a newborn infant. All because only then could the container's chakra network grow accustomed to the influx of power from the beast. Naruto was that child, a newborn whose umbilical cord had been cut not even an hour before. Of course the Yondaime was still a man, a powerful man, but a man nonetheless. Even such a man as he could not simply seal the fox away, he required help. To receive this help he summoned a greater being called the Shinigami. In return for aid, the Shinigami would be given the Yondaime's soul as payment. Thus died the Yondaime Hokage, and so began Naruto's life of semi-misery. If not for the kindness of Kushina taking in Mikoto and Tsukiko, he may very well have grown up alone. That being said, though he was grateful to have them, he wished his mother could have been with him. After all, a mother wouldn't call her son, Sama. He wanted friends, he wanted to be seen for himself, he wanted ramen. Wait. Priorities, Naruto. First things first, and all that. So, it's because of Kurama? He asked, suddenly realizing he was rambling to himself in his head. He sheepishly rubbed the back of his head with one hand. He needed to stop doing that. He had met the giant fox in his sleep last year, and was pleasantly surprised. The fox, Kurama as he found it was called, wasn't filled with hatred and anger as he was originally led to believe. Instead he was greeted calmly. The scenery was something like a small forested glade. Of course, in respect to Kurama, a great many things were considered small. The two had talked for what seemed like hours. Kurama coming to be surprised at the level of thoughtfulness present in a 3-year-old child, and Naruto was surprised Kurama hadn't tried to kill or maim him. They struck a fairly easy truce. Naruto wouldn't forcibly take Kurama's power, and in return Kurama would help build Naruto into a person his mother would be proud of. So far to date, the agreement was working fairly well. There were 2 little side effects that Naruto didn't know about, however. And Kurama didn't feel like enlightening the boy just yet. Mostly because even she didn't know what they were. Oh yes, that was surprise for Naruto, to discover the legendary beast was female. Mikoto and Kurenai felt empowered by that revelation. Mikoto could only nod her head. I would assume as much, Naruto-sama. Kurama-san is very much disliked for the occurrence 4 years ago. Many still hold grudges for lost loved ones, and seeing as they cannot harm Kurama-san directly, they choose to attempt to harm you in her place. Noticing the boy's down expression, Mikoto, Kurenai and Ayame were all quick to give him a supporting hug, hoping to bolster him. And it seemed to work as Naruto simply returned the hug, basking in the feeling that at least these 3 cared. It was enough for him. Even if he wanted more, for now it was enough. Continuing the journey back to Naruto's home, the group fell into a comfortable silence, broken only by Kurenai's sporadic giggles as she remembered the latest prank. She also found amusement in the fact that she was constantly referred to as Konoha's Ice Queen, when she was neither fond of the cold, nor a queen. It seems as though the name came from her refusal to date anyone, male or female. She snorted. She had to help take care of Naruto-sama and take missions as a kunoichi so as to not strain her master's pocket. She simply didn't have time for dating. The irony was not lost on her. Nor were the pranks played on spiteful men and women who didn't take no for an answer. Giggling softly again, she admitted to herself that if she was to date, she would want someone more like Naruto-sama. Not him specifically, but someone who would stand up to others for her honor, support her choices and decisions, maybe pamper her a little. Kurenai sighed as she realized she was getting somewhat depressed. Such a man probably didn't exist in Konoha. Oh well, at least Naruto-sama was considerate of her feelings, even if he was far too young to understand everything. The boy was only 4 years old after all, and at that today was his birthday. She still remembered being asked by Kushina-sama, during the woman's pregnancy, to look after Naruto should something happen to her. Of course Kurenai agreed. It was a great honor to be entrusted with the safety of Kushina's child, though she hoped it wouldn't come to pass, if only for the child's sake. Kurenai remembered everything that happened when she was still a genin assigned to watch Kushina during the pregnancy. She could even recall the first time she laid eyes on what she would come to call home. A stately two-story traditional house, similar in appearance to the Hyugas, but an unexplained amount larger, and of course the Uzumaki whirl instead of the Hyuga yin-yang trigram at the gate. The Hyuga compound was large enough to fit the entire clan and half as many guests, total capacity coming to around 450 people. The Uzumaki compound at first seemed smaller, maybe enough room for about 100 people to reside there, however the inside was much larger, easily containing enough space for nearly 600. Kurenai was still trying to figure out the trick behind the drastic deceptive appearance, with no success. She had asked Kushina once, but despite being treated as family the woman refused to part with the information, all the while wearing an infuriating enigmatic smile, saying that if Kurenai could figure it out on her own it would mean that much more. Kurenai loved Kushina as she would her own sister, but damned if the woman wasn't infuriating at times. Glancing down at the young boy walking between her and Makoto she couldn't but think, like mother like child. Kurenai giggled quietly at the thought. The two so alike it impossible to not see the resemblance, despite the different hair and eye colors. Glancing around at her current company, Kurenai couldn't help but wonder how it came to be. Uchiha Makoto seemingly accepted a servant's role under the Uzumaki family due to being taken in when she had no other possible options, and apparently hadn't once looked back. Kurenai had been Kushina's Chunin guard, and somehow found herself in the position of agreeing to become another of the Uzumaki vassals. She was still trying to figure out how she got roped into that. Then there was Ayame. Kurenai wasn't actually sure why the young girl was another vassal, her father certainly wasn't. It was a mystery, and Kurenai loved mysteries. This one though was getting under her skin. Primarily because no matter what she tried, or where she looked, she simply could not find a reason for it. While all she got from Ayame on the subject was a simple, "I owe Kushina a debt, I will repay it." Not exactly informative, but it did set the boundary. Oh, there were others who had sworn servitude to the Uzumaki over the years or had simply come to belong to the family, but they weren't in her thoughts right now. Keeping an eye out on their surroundings, she wasn't surprised to see many of the passing civilians throwing Naruto glares ranging from annoyance to outright venomous. Nothing new, but it still aggravated her to know how blind her fellow villagers were. Honestly, the people knew the Yondaime was a seal master, so was Kushina as she taught the man. How could people still think that Naruto was the Kyuubi? At least they weren't stupid enough to try and keep him from shopping in places. Sighing yet again at the foolishness of others, Kurenai discovered they had arrived home while she was thinking. Stepping forward to open the door, Kurenai stiffened with her hand upon the frame. There was a presence inside that didn't belong there. Quickly signing to Makoto that something was wrong, Kurenai moved to block the door with her body as she opened it, Makoto subtly moving Naruto behind herself. Upon seeing the intruder, Kurenai was surprised. Not at who they were, she had no idea who this person was, but rather at the simply outrageous outfit they were wearing. Standing there was a tall, handsome young man, in long dark robes, and some odd kind of gold-lined chest armor, complete with a three-piece pauldron on either shoulder. His hair was red as fresh blood, coming to just under his shoulders, and bright blue-green eyes, and a somewhat charming smile. "Ah, my apologies for intruding, but would happen to know where I can find the young lord of this house? My name is Sirzechs Lucifer, and I need to speak with him concerning important matters," the man said, while giving Kurenai what she presumed to be his most disarming smile. Well, this was unexpected. Naruto Pav. "I'm here, what is this important business?" Naruto asked, stepping out from behind Makoto and into view of the man. In doing so, Naruto noticed something, or rather, someone else, standing behind the one introduced as Sirzechs. A woman with moderately long silver hair hanging down her back in two thick braids while two smaller braids fell on either side of her face, hanging down to her rather ample chest. She was wearing a maid outfit, of all things, and carried the look with a stoic visage reflecting a serious nature within her silver-gray eyes that belied the power and pressure he felt from her. It wasn't as strong as what he could feel from Sirzechs or Kurama for that matter, but it was stronger than anything he had felt from a human. "Ah, good. Allow me to reintroduce myself. I am Sirzechs Lucifer, one of the 4 great Satans who rule over the underworld, and your cousin. More accurately a cousin to your mother, but that's neither here nor there. The man stated, once more intruding himself. Naruto was confused for the second time that evening. Cousin? He had no living relatives. The Hokage said so. Even Makoto had said she wasn't certain if there existed any family for him. So how was it possible for this tall man to be his cousin? It didn't make any sense. Unless this Sirzechs was from his mother's hidden parentage? Her devil ancestry? After puzzling it over for a few moments, Naruto decided. Sirzechs-san, I'm not sure what it is you want to speak of, but I do know it is not a topic for everyone in the street to hear. Let us go inside to speak more. However, it would be very rude to not know the name of lady you are with. The young boy said. He may be 4 years old, but he was raised by Uchiha Makoto. Manners were practically drilled into him. He shuddered internally at a memory of failing to be polite. Makoto was a wonderful and kind woman, but you should really start running if you cross her. Ah, of course, Sirzechs replied, moving out of the way to reveal the woman behind him. This is Graphia, my wife and maid to my family. Her insistence, I assure you. The woman gave a small bow of respect. A pleasure to meet you, Uzumaki-sama. Graphia Lucifuge, at your service, she said. With me are my friends and guards, Uchiha Makoto, Yuichi Kurenai, and Ichiraku Ayame. Naruto said, indicating with a hand each of the mentioned women. With the introductions done, Naruto led everyone inside to a large living room, occupied by a couple comfortable-looking couches facing each other across a low table. Makoto broke off from the group to make tea for the discussion, as was only proper. Once the tea had been made and served, Makoto took up position behind and to the left of Naruto, even as Kurenai was behind and to his right, while Ayame knelt at one end of the table so as to serve more tea should it become necessary. On the other couch Sirzechs took a seat directly across from Naruto, as Graphia took up a position behind him directly across from Makoto. Sirzechs cleared his throat. Now, let us talk. Of your mother, of her connection to the underworld, and of her current state of being, for Uzumaki Kushina is not yet dead. Uzumaki Kushina gave her now 16-year-old son a quick peck on the cheek. Good luck, Naruto. Those exams aren't going to be too easy, you know, especially not with the changes made in the academy's curriculum. I know, Kushina, but I'll ace them all the same. Naruto replied. 16 years old. 12 years passed since that meeting with Sirzechs Lucifer, and Naruto couldn't have been happier. It could be said that meeting changed everything. How Naruto was viewed, how he was treated, and more importantly, how he, himself, went about things. As that day he learned of his status as a high-class devil. Standing at a clean 5 feet and 9 inches in height, Naruto was one of the tallest in his class. He wore a hooded sweater unzipped, with a white shirt and light brown pants. The sweater was odd though. It wasn't a single color, but rather a seemingly random pattern of grays and greens. Where he got it no one really knew, but they did find it much more difficult to find him in a forest while he wore it. To finish his ensemble he had 2 leather belts crossing over his waist, clasped in the center by buckle in the shape of the Uzumaki whirl. Hanging from the backside of the belt was a single odd-looking broad-bladed sword, and off the right side were a trio of scrolls, while the left had an odd double scabbard with 2 knives. Poking up slightly from beneath his shirt was an odd red-colored symbol reminiscent of a king from the game of chess. Putting on a pair of common blue sandals worn by shinobi everywhere, Naruto took one last look at the woman seeing him off. Kushina was, without a doubt or statement to the contrary, a beautiful woman. Long bright red hair fell freely to her waist, and expressive blue-gray eyes matched her flawless lightly tanned complexion. If one wasn't aware of her true age one would think Kushina a woman barely into her 20s. Topping her height at a mere 5 foot and 5 inches, wearing a light green dress and cream-colored apron she was a stunning woman. Unfortunately for many this appearance harbored a terrible temper, and this temper is what gained her the moniker, the red-hot habanero. Seeing Kushina though, Naruto couldn't help but remember the conversation all those years ago with Sirzechs even as his feet followed the familiar path to the Shinobi Academy, flanked on either side by a dark-haired girl. Finding out your mother, who was thought to be dead, was alive in some kind of coma would be enough to make any child's day. However, there were apparently a few problems with waking her. The primary one being that her mind, or soul if you will, was missing, So even if her eyes were open there was simply no one there. A living corpse, one could say. Where was her soul? Inside the seal holding Kurama. Or more accurately, it was partially powering the seal. How were they to get her out of the seal? That was a question they weren't able to answer quite so easily. The seal was supposed to bind Naruto and Kurama at the level of their souls, so that if one died so too did the other. This is where Sirzechs had an idea. They would kill Naruto. Naturally the phrasing of that idea was not received well. Quickly diffusing the potentially harmful to his health situation, Sirzechs had made mention of a strange system the devils had that could force the rebirth of person. By using this system the condition of dying would be met and the seal would fail. Or that's what he had hoped at least. The theory was sound, but it was only a theory. Even if they were to use it, it wasn't something they would have been able to for a few years as Naruto's body wasn't strong enough to handle the influx of power at that time. Besides, if the seal was to fail they didn't want it to do so inside Konoha, thus Sirzechs was to set up an area in the underworld. Flashback. It was 2 years before Sirzechs returned and announced that everything was set, then conjured a large magic circle and sweeping Naruto, Makoto, Kurenai, Tsukiko, and Ayame away with him. Why bring Tsukiko? Because she refused to be left behind. The group would have been larger, but thankfully the other sworn vassals were either out on missions or training with their original families. The area they were taken to was a large cleared-out space behind what appeared to be an enormous manor house. Standing at the edge of the clearing were 3 men, 3 women, and 1 little girl who seemed about Naruto's age. Sirzechs introduced them as Lord Gremory and his wife, Venelana Gremory, and their daughter, Rias Gremory, along with the other 3 great Satans, who seemed to prefer being called either by name or as the Yan Dai Mao, who ruled the underworld. Ajuka Beelzebub. A tall handsome-looking man with strong features and messy black hair and eyes. Seraphal Leviathan. A young-looking girl of breathtaking beauty. Long black hair divided into 2 pigtails, brilliant violet eyes, and a bubbly personality. Not to mention the largest chest Naruto had seen on anyone not a full-grown woman. And Falbium Asmodeus, a person who reminded Naruto greatly of the Nara men, in both personality and appearance. Apparently they were there for certain reasons, the Gremorys because it was their land and their son who requested it, and the Demon Lords were there primarily because they were bored. While Ajuka was there because it was his system that was being put to the test to see if this would work. He was somewhat nervous as the timing of everything would have to be almost spot on. In the center of the clearing was a stone bier, and lying atop it was the comatose form of Uzumaki Kushina. Next to her was a small box that contained a number of odd-looking items that Naruto could recognize as chess pieces. His only question was with the number of them. There should only be 16, but for some reason there were 22. Confused he turned to Sirzechs for an answer. Seeing the expression Sirzechs motioned for Ajuka to come over and explain things. It seems as though Sirzechs was uncertain as to why there were so many pieces as well. Ah, young Naruto, I presume? Receiving a nod of the head for an answer Ajuka continued, you see, this is what we'll be using to hopefully revive your mother. I call it the evil piece system. You may have noticed that they are modeled after the game of chess. There is a reason for that. I like the game. This statement caused a large sweat drop to appear for everyone, so that's why. In any case, that's neither here nor there. Picking up the king, Ajuka carried on with his explanation, by adding your blood, infused with your devil energy, and placing just a drop on each of these pieces you bind them to you. By taking the king into your body, you will then become the king of this particular set, and as such the leader of your own group. Now normally there are only the usual 16 pieces of king, queen, 2 knights, 2 bishops, 2 rooks, and 8 pawns. However, as a king, myself I can tell you with authority that Kushina-san cannot be brought back with any of these. The reason being is that each piece is only so strong, and as such the more powerful the person you're trying to use it on, the stronger the piece must be. If I were to use numbers to represent the strength of the pieces it'd go like this asterisk. King, 50 points. It's the most important piece in the game after all. Queen, 9 points. I know it's a steep drop, but in the overall scheme she's still important. Knight, 5 points. Rook, 4 points. Bishop, 3 points, and pawn, 1 point. It is for this reason, as well as Sirzechs bugging me to make you a unique piece as a birthday gift, that I created these others off the fairy pieces that exist within the rules of chess. Placing the king back in the box, Ijuka then picks up a piece that looks like a knight wearing the queen's crown. This piece is modeled after the Amazon fairy piece. It combines the strength of the queen and knight and is the strongest piece I've made to date. Kushina is worth more than queen, but there can only be one king, thus the Amazon with a total value of 14 points. The other 5 pieces are dragon, combing knight and pawn, empress, combining knight and rook, princess, combining knight and bishop, the wazir, also called the inverted rook, and finally the nightmare, or inverted knight. Taking a deep breath, Ijuka paused to see if Naruto was following what he was saying. Seeing another nod from him, Ijuka continued further. Now each piece has been granted a special ability. The king didn't get one, but it's worth 50 points, so who cares? Knights get incredible speed. Rooks gain superhuman strength and defense. Bishops receive a dramatic increase to their magical reserves. Queen has all the above to a lightly lesser amounts than the other pieces. And finally the pawn, this one has the ability to promote itself to any other piece so long as it's in enemy territory, or has the king's permission. Ijuka sees an excited expression cross Naruto's face, and becomes curious about the boy. Tell me, Naruto, what will you do with the power to resurrect the recently dead? How will you think of your peerage, as it is called? The excited look never left Naruto's face, it only gained an equal amount of sincerity as he replied, my family, my friends. My peerage will be those who are important to me, those I cherish and would lay my life down for. Glancing over to the ones who followed the boy, Ijuka could see the pride and joy on their faces as they heard Naruto's stance. Ijuka could only presume they expected to join Naruto's peerage. Well, isn't that food for thought? Very well, Naruto. Now this is what will be happening. Kushina was a king herself before the events 6 years ago, and her piece is still inside her. I will be using the system to forcefully eject the piece. While I do this, you must bind those pieces in the box to you and absorb the king there. Wait. Naruto interrupted. Mom was a king. Did she ever use any of her pieces? Looking irritated at the interruption, Ijuka replied, from what I understand she only used her queen piece, and later married the poor sod. Blinking suddenly wide eyes, Naruto then erupted into loud laughter, followed shortly by the other humans present. The Yondaime Hokage, commonly thought of as the most powerful shinobi to ever wear the Konoha Hite 8, was made into a queen. While it was a powerful position, it still seemed somewhat embarrassing. It took several minutes for Naruto and the others to regain control of themselves. May I continue now? Ijuka asked, still irritated. Naruto nods while wiping tears of laughter from his eyes. Good. Now as I was saying, while I eject the king from Kushina, you will have to bind those pieces to you, and absorb the king into yourself. It's not hard, just bind it and then hold it, it will merge with you on its own. With this done your seal will, as becoming a king, will technically kill you. Thus the absolutely enormous space we're in. Once the seal is broken you will have a short period of time to use the Amazon on Kushina. Now the pieces respond to a command of sorts. This command is simple. I insert your name, command you Kushina, be reborn as my Amazon. A lot of other devils throw in something about the revived being their servants, but it isn't actually necessary. While this is going, Sirzechs will be dealing with the disorientation that Kurama-san will no doubt be feeling after his release. Nodding with a determined look on his face, Naruto said, let's do this. I want my mother back. XXXXXXX. Flashback end. XXXXXXX. Needles to say the entire thing went off without a hitch. Well, almost. Naruto grimaced slightly at something they discovered about certain pieces of his. 6 of his pieces had mutated into stronger versions of themselves, multiplying their values by 4 times. His queen, 1 bishop, and 4 pawns. But that wasn't all. It seems that instead of becoming a uniform bright red from their initial black state, many of his pieces had a slightly pink cast to them. They still weren't quite certain what it meant, but many of his peerage had been acting far closer than that of friend or family. Kushina just so happened to be one of them. She never called him son, but she would always be touching his face, laying a hand on his wrist or shoulder, walking with an unconscious sway to her hips, giving him a kiss on the cheek even though she seemed to want to put it somewhere else. He just didn't really want to think of where just yet. They had shared the typical over-emotional reunion at first though. Konoha had certainly been ecstatic to have Kushina back, however, if only to have one of the strongest kunoichi to ever grace the village back in the fold. Okay, that was only half true. The Konoha Shinobi Corps was ecstatic. The civilian council, not so much. It seemed that Kushina's return reignited the will of fire within the old Sandaime Hokage, and they could no longer run roughshod over him as they had been. Oh well, no skin off the Uzumaki's back. It wasn't long after her return that said civilian council reached too far over their given authority and were disbanded. For some reason this seemed to drastically drop the amount of paperwork the Hokage had on his desk daily. Who knew? But that was neither here nor there as Naruto came out of that first day with far more than he originally thought he would. For one thing, he had thought Kurama would simply take her freedom and leave. Imagine Naruto's surprise when the giant fox offered to become his familiar. Apparently Kurama was bored enough that she would even be willing to do menial chores for Naruto. Chores that included spreading out summoning flyers so Naruto's power and reputation would increase by doing jobs. Though Kurama did not stay within Konoha while passing out those flyers. No, the flyers for Konoha were distributed by genin teams as a D-ranked mission. Sucks to be them. Another thing was the acquisition of 4 more members for his peerage. Unsurprising really, but he wasn't going to complain. Devils lived drastically longer than humans, giving him enough time to get his feelings sorted out, as he was already starting to feel something for Makoto. As to what piece each of them became, well, Makoto became his empress, Kuranai chose to become his first bishop, while both Tsukiko and Ayame became his first 2 pawns. And over the last 10 years he had used the rest of his pieces. Coming out of his thoughts he found that he and his 2 companions had arrived at the academy. Today was the day. Time to become a shinobi of Konoha. Looking behind him he took a quick glance at the 2 following him. Flanking him to his left was Uchiha Tsukiko. 10 years since becoming his pawn, and she had become very beautiful in his eyes. Long raven tresses bound in a tight braid down her back, falling just short of her ass. Eyes as dark as night, framed by equally dark lashes, and a face that was reminiscent of her mother's. She stood a bit shorter than he did, at 5 foot and 6 inches, her body was nothing short of spectacular. Lithe frame, more focused to speed than strength, and delicate curves that enhanced the look of her modest bust size, completed with a perfect light tan over toned muscles. Tsukiko truly was a beautiful young woman. Her outfit of a simple dark denim jacket, mid-riff bearing black shirt with daring neckline, dark blue denim pants seemingly held up with a leather belt closed by a buckle in the form of the Uzumaki whirl, and common black low-heeled shinobi sandals only seemed to enhance her further. Sitting just under her throat was the tattoo of a pawn chess piece in reddish pink. Meanwhile on his right was another girl his age, this one also with long raven-colored hair, but it shone in a way to look like a dark blue and was left to fall free down her back to just above her hips. Her eyes were a solid white, no pupil whatsoever, framed in a heart-shaped face that was lovely to look at. She stood even with Tsukiko in height, but that is where the similarities in their bodies ended. Where Tsukiko was lithe, this girl was the very definition of voluptuous. Long legs, generous hips, small waist, enormous bust, and lovely ivory pale skin over toned and corded muscle. Her outfit certainly wasn't shy either. Outfitted in chain mesh undershirt, white sleeveless battle-style kimono that only gave a tantalizing glimpse of cleavage and held together with a black leather belt bearing the Uzumaki whirl, black spandex shorts, and black low-heeled shinobi sandals, this young lady was a vision of beauty. And to finish everything, just beneath her throat was the image of a knight chess piece's head on top of an inverted bishop's hat, also in a reddish pink like the other girl. This was Hyuga Hinata, and this young woman became Naruto's 13 years ago, before all this devil business. XXXXXX. Flashback. XXXXXX. Out for a late-night walk with Makoto and Kuranai due to being unable to sleep, Naruto had found himself confronting a man in dark clothing holding an unconscious little girl. While Makoto and Kuranai dealt with the man, Naruto had snuck up and stolen the girl from him and then retreated behind his protectors. Not long after that Hyuga Hiyashi, the girl's father, had arrived and incapacitated the man. Turned out he was the lead negotiator for the non-aggression treaty that Konoha had just signed with another village called Kumo. That didn't look good on Kumo, especially when it came to light that the treaty was just an excuse to get someone inside Konoha to steal the Byakugan, the special bloodline trait of the Hyuga clan, or the Sharingan, the bloodline ability of the Uchiha clan. Apparently the man had thought Hinata was the easier target. Considering he nearly succeeded, Naruto couldn't say the man was wrong. The man was beheaded and the remains were sent back to Kumo along with a copy of the man's signed confession. The Sandaime Raikage, who had ordered the whole thing, had been forced to commit suicide to regain some of his honor in the eyes of his country's daimyo. In any case, as Naruto was the one who had saved his daughter, Hiashi had asked the young boy if there was something he wanted in return. Naruto, having been only 3 years old at the time, had naively pointed at Hinata and said he wanted her. In his mind he had just wanted a friend. Hiashi, however, took it to mean that Naruto wanted Hinata as his bride in the future and had immediately wrote up a betrothal contract, with Makoto and the Sandaime as witnesses. What a mess. XXXXXXX. Flashback end. XXXXXXX. Upon Naruto's return from the underworld he had asked Hinata if she would like to join his peerage. She agreed, figuring it was only natural to want to spend that much more time with the one she was to be a wife to, and he promptly used his princess piece. When asked why that piece, he replied that she was the princess of the Hyuga clan. Not exactly romantic, but he was 6 at the time. What does anyone know of romance at that age? Naruto also asked 3 other people to become a part of his peerage. Since these were others who had sworn to serve the Uzumaki, they had all agreed as easily as Hinata had. Thus had Azuki Yugao, a beautiful purple-haired woman in Anbu, become Naruto's first knight. Considering she wielded a sword, he thought it appropriate. Her medical studies were a rather nice bonus touch. Gekko Hayate, a sickly man of average height and with significant bags under his eyes and seemingly permanent cough, became Naruto's second knight. Again he wielded a sword, so it seemed to fit. This had also had the unexpected bonus of curing Hayate of whatever it was that ailed him. For that alone the man counted it a blessing. Being able to spend even more of his life with his lover, Yugao, was even sweeter. Yes, those two were quite happy to become knights. And finally, Hitaki Kakashi, a man with gravity-defying silver hair and his Hite-8 pulled down over his left eye, became Naruto's third pawn. It actually cost Naruto one of his mutated pawns and 2 normal ones, but the pawn seemed to fit Kakashi's adaptive style of combat perfectly. As a bonus, it seems the rebirth property of the ceremony granted him full control over his hidden Sharingan left eye. Previously he could not turn it off due to not being an Uchiha with the properly adapted body, now though it was literally his. Still only his left eye, but at least he could turn it off so there would be no threat of chakra exhaustion. Not that it had stopped him from keeping his Hite-8 over said eye, but everyone had their quirks. So here Naruto was, 2 members of his peerage following him to the Shinobi Academy, also they could become shinobi themselves. And they would. They had no doubt about that. They would not allow themselves to fail. Well ladies, shall we show them what the Uzumaki devil family can do? Naruto asked while giving a fox-like grin. Agreed, Naruto-sama, we will show these poseurs what true shinobi are. Oh Kami, I still can't believe the nerve of that Haruno girl. Tsukiko complained. Haruno Sakura, someone who could loosely be described as a boy with pink hair trying to pass themselves off as female, and due to a very high-pitched voice was succeeding. Or at least that was how they would have described her a few years ago. Now she at least looked right. Instead of an anorexic young boy, there was a budding young woman. Too bad her voice didn't really change much. Sakura and Tsukiko had some bad blood between them. Primarily because Sakura was of the opinion that girls should just look pretty and let themselves be rescued by their knight in shining armor. Followed by living happily ever after, and being spoiled by said knight. In other words, she was a die-hard fangirl, while Tsukiko was a kunoichi. Fortunately Naruto wasn't the object of her affections. No, that poor soul was their very own academy teacher, Uchiha Itachi, who was assisted by Amino Iruka. It used to be Iruka supported by a man named Mizuki, no last name, but Mizuki was ousted as a traitor 4 years prior in an incident involving the village's forbidden scroll. After which Iruka, feeling somewhat responsible for not noticing Mizuki's treachery, requested a new teacher to be in charge of the class. Itachi just so happened to be available, and was nominated by the acting Uzumaki clan head, Uzumaki Kushina, at the general meeting the morning after said event. Poor Itachi. Naruto didn't really feel any kind of sympathy. After all, Itachi and his cousin Shisui had come to the Uzumaki 8 years before with a deal. If the Uzumaki would protect him and his clan, then the Uchiha would swear an ancient oath to serve the Uzumaki. The oath that Itachi spoke wasn't as simple as just saying some words and being done with it, no. It was the kind that was burned into the very soul of the oath taker, so that should they even think of honestly betraying their sworn master, they would drop dead on the spot. With this on the line, Naruto had to know exactly what would cause the majority of the Uchiha clan, a clan filled with pride, to take such a drastic measure. It seemed that Fugaku had finally lost it and had been planning to try to overthrow the Hokage, while Itachi was being ordered to massacre the entire clan in response. To try and stop the destruction, Itachi and Shisui convinced well over 4/5 of the clan that the only way out was an oath of service to another clan or family. The Uzumaki were simply the best choice due to long-standing animosity. If the Uchiha were willing to swear such an oath to the Uzumaki, they had to be sincere. In the end, Uchiha Fugaku and his few supporters were executed as traitors to Konoha, and the Uchiha clan became willing servants to another clan. They even discovered they didn't mind it. It seems that Uzumaki Naruto was a rather undemanding master. Oh well, at least Itachi had been saved from being forced into marrying several women to restore the glory of his clan. That was the major upside to serving as an Uzumaki vassal. Itachi really didn't want to marry multiple women. If the council wanted him, they had to go through the Uzumaki first, as being their servant meant his life was theirs to do with as they pleased, and the Uzumaki were quite content with the current situation concerning their now defunct issues with the Uchiha. Makoto was even offered her previous position as clan matriarch. She refused politely, stating she didn't have time to be a mother, caretaker, and matriarch all at once. Bullshit. She just didn't want the paperwork. Itachi didn't find out till a few years later that the real reason he decided to save his clan, the Clan Restoration Act, that was so popular everywhere in the elemental nations, a law that basically forced the last male of any clan to marry many women, was entirely voluntary. If you had no desire to be involved, no one could legally force you to participate. Itachi had not known that. Neither Kushina nor Naruto had bothered to enlighten him on it either until after he had sworn his oath. After all, Naruto was a willing participant in that act since he was 6. At the time of the problem in question, he already had 4 fiancées with a possible 5th waiting on confirmation. It wasn't his fault Itachi didn't want multiple wives. Now, years later, Itachi had the means and know how to defend himself from any conceivable problem that may arise. Serving the Uzumaki protected him from scrutiny by the councils, teaching at the academy gave him something to do with his day, and he had found a girlfriend to keep the fangirls at bay. A Yame of Ichiraku ramen. How that came about, no one but they knew, and they were tight-lipped on it. Probably something embarrassing though. Naturally Itachi knew about her being a devil. You couldn't have the deep kind of relationship between lovers and not know that. It would have come back around to bite her in the ass later if he suddenly found out. Because of this though, Itachi also discovered the other devils in the Uzumaki, namely everyone but himself. It wasn't an issue for him, but it did come as something of a surprise. Considering the two were still seeing each other, it was safe to say Itachi had no problems dating someone who could be described as non-human. Actually, all of the Uzumaki servants knew of their devil status, and none of them seemed bothered by it. They didn't mention it either, it simply wasn't an issue. In other words, they didn't care. All this ran through Naruto's mind as he, Tsukiko, and Hinata found their way to their classroom and seated themselves in the back, one girl on either side of him. Time to pass the tests, make the grade, and set the proverbial bar so high you'd need wings to find it. Wait, his entire peerage had wings, never mind. XXXXXXX. XXXXXXX. As Itachi walked into the classroom, he glanced about at his students. He could honestly say he proud of most of them. Some few were disappointing, if only because they had potential and refused to realize it. That one student more than any other. Haruno Sakura. The girl had small reserves, but an agile mind with a nearly eidetic memory. Her slim body type made for a deceptively powerful punch, almost like Tsunade-sama of the Sannin. Itachi had no doubt that if the girl were to apply herself she could be the next great medic nin. Instead she was a hopeless fangirl who believed her knight in shining armor, aka himself, would jump in to save her in every possible situation before gallantly carrying her off into the sunset. Itachi silently gave a snort of amusement. The girl watched too many movies. He hoped the girl's sensei would be able to her of that. Didn't she understand that he already had a girlfriend? One that would quite happily cut certain portions of him off should he ever so much as contemplated being unfaithful? He rather liked his parts where they all were, thank you. Looking over some of the other promising students he almost couldn't stop the smile from forming. Almost. It was a known fact that Uchiha Itachi cannot smile. Ever. Ayame would say differently, but that's her. Nara Shikamaru. Heir to the Nara clan of shadow users. A so-called closet genius. With an IQ over 200. And perhaps the laziest person Itachi had ever met. Rivaled only by the boy's father. He pitied Yoshino-san, the boy's mother. She had a difficult job trying to keep him motivated. Aburame Shino. Heir to the Aburame clan of Kakaichu users. A quiet and logical child. Itachi rather liked him, soft-spoken but profound. An endearing quality, to Itachi at least. Akamichi Choji. Heir to the Akamichi clan of body expansion. Big-boned. Yes, the boy was big-boned. Even Itachi wasn't about to call an Akamichi fat. Surprisingly their body fat content was only about 10%. Who knew? Yamanaka Ino. Heiress to the Yamanaka clan of mind readers. Devious, manipulative, unscrupulous, and a huge gossip. Itachi shuddered, wondering what her parents did in a past life to deserve such a child as her. He also silently and internally wept for any possible secret the girl got her hands on. It wouldn't be a secret for much longer after that. Inuzuka Kiba. Current heir to the Inuzuka clan of Ninkin users since his elder sister, Inuzuka Hana, was given to the Uzumaki as recompense for something stupid he did. Brash, bold, confident, outspoken, and an alpha male complex with his sights set on Hyuga Hinata, who wanted nothing to do with the boy. In other words, annoying. Hyuga Hinata, previously the heiress of the Hyuga clan of Jukin Taijutsu. Confident, capable, and utterly loyal to her fiancé, Uzumaki Naruto. There really wasn't much more Itachi could say about this once shy girl. It seemed being engaged to be married to a boy she loved was an immense boost to her, even if she had to share him. Uchiha Tsukiko, second-born child of Uchiha Makoto and Uchiha Fugaku. Bold, confident, capable, absolutely loyal to her master Uzumaki Naruto. Loyal enough to become a devil to serve him longer than a human kid, and to accept his proposal. Yes, she was one of his fiancés. And she couldn't be happier for it. Itachi was also happy for her. As any good brother would be. Then there was Uzumaki Naruto, heir to the Uzumaki clan, formerly of Uzushigakure. The head family of the clan was known as royalty, and Itachi knew them as a high-class devil family whose territory was the entirety of the elemental nations. Confident, talented, capable, passionate, loyal to those who called him friend, and engaged to many women. Uzumaki Naruto was the current master of the Uzumaki family, and Itachi's own sworn master. Yes, these 9. Aburame Shino, Akamichi Choji, Haruno Sakura, Hyuga Hinata, Inuzuka Kiba, Nara Shikamaru, Uchiha Tsukiko, Uzumaki Naruto, and Yamanaka Ino. These 9 were perhaps the best this year had to offer. The shinobi world wouldn't know what hit them. This was not to say he didn't believe in the rest of the students. Itachi had no doubt they would all pass the academy exam. It was the Jonin sensei's individual tests that he wasn't so confident about. After all, if the students failed there, it was likely they would be put into either the reserves, the military police, or back into the academy. Thankfully, he wasn't in charge of the remedial courses. All right, settle down everyone, and we'll begin the exam with the written portion, Itachi stated in his usual monotone voice. Amazingly, despite the ruckus most of the students were making, they all heard him, and hurried to obey. They did not want to annoy Itachi. Considering most of them were civilians, they probably were told horror stories about him. Stories he couldn't actually disprove. After Iruka passed out the tests one to each student upside down, Itachi began the timer. You have 2 hours. Start. The sound of paper flipping filled the air. Ah, silence. Wonderful, is it not, Iruka? Itachi asked in low voice. Yes, why can't they always be like this? Iruka responded in a soft, forlorn tone. Itachi couldn't hold his snort of amusement this time. Because then we might actually want to keep them. XXXXXXX. XXXXXXX. Alright, time is up. Hand your papers to Iruka and then get yourselves out to the practice yard for the ranged weapon portion. Itachi stated. Watching as the papers were handed in, Itachi absently noted that only 6 were completely filled out. So there was the possibility of competition for top of the class this year. How interesting. Following the students out to the target range of the practice yard, Itachi took up position beside a table with sets of kunai and shuriken. Not that they were limited to these weapons, they were simply the standard for all shinobi. All students were encouraged to find another ranged weapon to become proficient with. Most chose senbon needles as they could at least be purchased easily in any shinobi weapon supply. Itachi took note that Hinata seemed to have acquired a longbow and quiver of arrows when he wasn't looking. Sneaky little girl. He was actually somewhat proud she could pull one over on him. He took another glance over the students to make sure none of the others had managed to pull the same stunt. He almost grimaced when he suddenly noticed that his younger sister had managed to don a second belt equipped with at least a dozen throwing knives. Not to be mistaken for kunai, these were flat steel blades designed only for precision throwing. Itachi had to wonder if Naruto-sama had some other kind of ranged weapon on him that he couldn't see. After all, those 2 knives in that double scabbard couldn't really be his choice, right? There were only 2. Granted, one of them looked like a broad-bladed throwing knife, but the other just looked like a heavy dagger of some sort. Perhaps he had something hidden? Why do I get the feeling Naruto has something interesting? Iruka asked. Because he most likely does, came Itachi's clinical response. Alright, listen up, you will each be given 10 shuriken and 10 kunai. Bonus points for vital areas. You will be scored on each individual weapon. Bonus points will also be given for showing proficiency with something other than kunai and shuriken, so I hope you all practiced. And so, down the list they went. Itachi was honest enough to admit he only really paid attention to those 9 students he thought had true potential. The others were so sad he almost fell asleep standing with his eyes open. He hadn't done that since. He couldn't actually remember. Aburame Shino, kunai, 75 points. Shuriken, 75 points. Chosen ranged weapon. Twin chakram, 80 points. Impressive, especially with such a difficult weapon. Had to get a new dummy. The 2 discs took the arms off before returning to their owner on an arc. Akamichi Choji, kunai, 70 points. Shuriken, 68 points. Chosen ranged weapon. Throwing axe, 80 points. Not bad at all. The accuracy of that axe was somewhat frightening. Haruno Sakura, kunai, 70 points. Shuriken, 57 points. Chosen ranged weapon. Senbon, 70 points. Surprising, she actually scored well. Itachi could have done without the kiss she threw his way though. It seems she was trying to impress him now instead of, wait to be rescued. Hyuga Hinata, kunai, 95 points. Shuriken, 80 points. Chosen ranged weapon. Longbow, 100 points. Itachi had to blink to make certain he saw correctly. A Hyuga with a bow. Frightening. She put arrows into the dummy so fast her hands looked like blurs of motion, emptying the quiver of 20 arrows in a matter of seconds. Each arrow hitting a different vital spot. They almost decided to bring out another dummy. Inuzuka Kiba, kunai, 88 points. Shuriken, 82 points. Chosen ranged weapon. None, 0 points. Not really the long-ranged type to start with, so his performance was still an impressive showing. Itachi noted that the young Inuzuka tossed a look of superiority at Naruto, who seemed to just shrug it off. Silent chuckle. Nara Shikamaru, kunai, 65 points. Shuriken, 65 points. Chosen ranged weapon. None, 0 points. Nara male, no motivation, enough said. Itachi would have to tell the boy's mother about his lacking performance. On second thought, that was too cruel. He would probably still do it, but even he would admit it was an evil thing to subject the poor boy to. Uchiha Tsukiko, kunai, 100 points. Shuriken, 98 points. Chosen ranged weapon. Precision throwing knives, 100 points. She was really too good with those. It wasn't like she was throwing them, but rather releasing them, guiding their path rather than forcing it. Uzumaki Naruto, Kunai, 100 points. Shuriken, 100 points. Then the boy did something Itachi felt he should have seen coming. Naruto, in a smooth movement bespeaking constant practice, drew and threw both knives from his waist. Both weapons found themselves embedded deep within the wood of the target dummy's head and heart. Then to top it off, another short knife-like blade came from nowhere on the end of a chain to cleanly slice the dummy's head off, before being drawn back to its wielder. A Kyoketsu shogi. Well, never let it be said that Uzumaki Naruto did anything by halves. He had learned not just one alternate ranged weapon, but three. Broad-bladed throwing knife, what appeared to be a heavy-bladed large knife called a Sirzechs asterisk, and the relatively unknown, chained dagger. Needless to say, 100 points, and a new dummy. After collecting his knives, it was Ino's turn. Yamanaka Ino, Kunai, 65 points. Shuriken, 70 points. Chosen ranged weapon. Senbon, 60 points. She clearly didn't practice enough, but after Naruto's performance she was bound to feel a little outclassed. Itachi felt he could cut the girl a little slack on his personal opinion, even if it wouldn't change her actual marks. Well done everyone. Now we move to the taijutsu portion of the test. Itachi stated in the usual calm voice they all knew. Did nothing faze the man? Apparently not, as he led the way to the taijutsu circle. The taijutsu test went by fairly quickly. Each student had 5 minutes to either land a solid blow on Iruka, or outlast the time without getting knocked unconscious. Most of the civilians failed miserably, whereas the ones Itachi was keeping an eye on did pretty well. Shino, Shikamaru, and Ino managed to outlast the time, while Choji, Hinata, Tsukiko, Naruto, Kiba, and surprisingly Sakura managed to land a hit in the given time frame. Kiba once again tried to outperform Naruto, gaining his hit in an impressive time 3 minutes. Naruto managed his strike at 1 minute and 40 seconds, subsequently bruising Kiba's ego more. Choji had a time of 4 minutes and 30 seconds, Hinata and Tsukiko tied at 2 minutes and 20, and Sakura received the time of 2 minutes and 40 seconds. Iruka was rather glad when the test was over and he could rest. Sakura's blow had hurt the most. Talk about a deceptive strength. Itachi marked down the scores as he led the way back to the practice range to complete the exam, the ninjutsu portion. Very well done, so far. Now it's time for the ninjutsu section. Each of you will be required to utilize the henge, transformation, the kawarimi, replacement, and a bunshin, replication, clone, jutsu. You will then have to use at least one other jutsu of your choice, so long as it is below B rank in destructive power. We don't need you leveling the village after all. Itachi's monotone voice somehow managed to reach each student's ears perfectly. As each one was called down, Itachi once more made notes of who did what and how well. It was his job after all, and he was damn good at it. Each of the students was at least capable of the henge and kawarimi, but a few found different bunshin jutsu to use instead of the standard taught in the academy. Shino, for instance, used what he called mushi bunshin, insect clone, which was rather impressive. His chosen bonus was a jutsu called Doden, mud wall, which created a rather large wall of dirt and mud in front of him. When Itachi tested the wall's strength, it managed to withstand his own Kaden, grand fireball, before crumbling. Full marks. Choji simply chose the root of the 3 standard techniques. Following that, he used his clan's Baika no Jutsu, multi-size technique, to double his chest area, and finished off with Nikuden Sensha, meatball tank, to flatten the training dummy. Full marks. New dummy. Sakura also chose the 3 basic jutsu, but followed up with something no one expected. Shozen no Jutsu, mystical palm technique. A healing jutsu, very impressive. Seemed the girl was possibly trying to model herself after Senju Tsunade. There were far worse role models for a young girl. Maybe she had finally gotten out of that fangirl stage? Seeing another kiss being thrown his way, Itachi suddenly found himself in doubt of his observational ability. Hinata used the Mizu Bunshin, water clone. Surprising that the girl decided on an elemental version. Her chosen bonus jutsu? She apparently needed a live target. Seeing neither of her teachers volunteering, she chose Naruto. When he stood across from her, she slid into a low stance before rushing close and unleashing a fury of feather-light blows she called Hake. 32 palms. Naruto looked in pain. Full marks. Resting period for Naruto. Itachi couldn't help a small, quiet chuckle when Hinata knelt in Seiza and let Naruto's head rest in her lap, all the while running her fingers through his hair to help ease his pain. Lucky boy. Kiba utilized his clan's version of the Bunshin called Jujin Bunshin, man-beast clone, which required the aid his ninkin, a small white dog called Akamaru. To follow up, he used a technique commonly found in Kumo, Raiden, electromagnetic murder to fry the training dummy. Given the name of the technique, and the look he threw Naruto, Itachi could guess why the boy learned it. Still, full marks, and another new dummy. Shikamaru simply used the basic 3, then tossed in his own version of one of his clan's jutsu, Kagemane, shadow possession. Essentially what it did was allow him to connect his shadow to someone else's, and from that point they were forced to move in the same way he did. An interesting technique, another with full marks. Tsukiko followed Hinata's example with Mizu Bunshin to top off her basic 3. Then, apparently deciding to go for broke, her bonus jutsu was the one and only Uchiha rite of passage technique, Kaden, Grand Fireball. The size was ample, the heat was properly overdone, and the dummy charred. Itachi gave a silent sigh as he once more noted down the full marks while motioning Iruka to again replace the dummy. It was times like these that made him question his acceptance of the job. Then it was Naruto's turn. Henge into Iruka, Kawarimi with a log, so far so good, and normal. It was then Itachi began to be worried. Naruto didn't do normal. Seeing a cross-shaped hand seal, Itachi braced himself. A cry of, Cage Bunshin, shadow clone. Later, and the field was filled with at least a dozen copies of the blonde-haired devil. Itachi started praying this was going to be the worst of it. No such luck. Dispersing his clones, Naruto then drew his sword. A relatively simple-looking straight-bladed, double-edged Celtic bastard sword. White-wrapped hilt, blued steel for the blade, pommel shaped like a flame. The only thing that made it look a bit strange was that it seemed to have an almost unearthly glow for a few seconds at first glance, as if it was not forged by the hand of man. And according to legend, it wasn't. Durnwin *, a legendary sword said to have been created by the fairy king Pwyll millennia ago. It was said the sword would burst into flame in the hand of one of true nobility, quite often seen as the predecessor of the greater legend of Excalibur. At least to those that had even heard of the sword. Legendary it might be, well-known it was not. Might have something to do with being in Naruto's family for most of its existence. The blade was considered an Uzumaki treasure. Proving at least part of the legend true, the blade burst into a joyous flame. Now whether that was because of its legend, or because it conducted fire chakra like no one's business, was up for debate. Taking the hilt in both hands, Naruto sighted on the newest dummy, then seemed to vanish. Itachi saw quite clearly the high Chunin level speed only to reappear with the blade thrust through the dummy's torso, lighting it aflame. A soft whisper found its way to Itachi's ear, first flame strike. Full marks. Another destroyed training dummy. Naruto sheathed his blade conspicuously no long on fire as Iruka brought out another dummy. Why they didn't think to just have a mess of them out already no one really knew, but the blame might fall on a certain lazy teacher, greatly resembling one of the current examinees, who was supposed to set things up for the exam. Ino chose to play it safe with the basic 3, then followed up with a rendition of her clan's jutsu, Shintention, mind-body switch. Fortunately for the instructors, she required a living target for this. Unfortunately, no one was really willing to be the test subject. So Shikamaru was volunteered by consensus. In the end, all she really did was force him to dance around a little in a very un-Shikamaru-like way before canceling her jutsu. Full marks, and a fairly decent demonstration to end the test with. Very well done, all of you, Itachi stated. Now let us head back to the classroom so Iruka and I can tally your scores and see who finished where. XXXXXXX. XXXXXXX. 2 hours later and our intrepid trio were on their return route to the Uzumaki compound, each sporting a new Hite 8 and joyful smiles. They graduated at the top of the class, Naruto managing to capture the Rookie of the Year, while Tsukiko grabbed Topku no Ichi, with Hinata in close contention. Now they just had to wait a week for their team assignments, hoping to be together then as they were now. Arriving, they opened the door to see Makoto waiting for them with a soft smile on her face. Her hands clasped in front of her newest idea for a uniform for the female members of the peerage. A simple waist-length kimono top, open enough to give a generous view of her cleavage, kept closed only by a thin leather belt bearing the Uzumaki whorl, short skirt, and thigh-high stockings, all in a dark red with silver linings and highlights. Nestled at the base of her throat was the reddish-pink marking of a knight chess piece's head on top of an inverted rook's crown. Naruto had no idea where she got the idea for the outfit, but the look was embraced with enthusiasm. Even the men started wearing a variation, just instead of the skirt and stockings they went with hakama, and colored everything in a charcoal gray. At least inside the mansion. Outside it, their looks were a strange mix if seen all together. "Welcome home, Naruto-sama. I see by the Hite 8 that you 3 passed your exams. This is wonderful news." Makoto's voice broke Naruto from his thoughts. "Yes, it is indeed. Please gather the peerage in the meeting hall. There is much to discuss," he stated in a calm tone. It was time. Naruto sat behind a large oaken desk. On the left side was a small stack of scrolls, presumably unrelated to the current meeting. He had changed out of his street attire into a more formal dark red kimono with silver lining, leaving it slightly open at the neck so as to show the mark at the base of his throat. Looking around the fairly large room occupied by his desk and chair along with 2 long couches and coffee table, he watched as the last of his immediately available peerage members filtered in. And by immediately available, he meant those that were in Konoha and capable of coming on short notice for a previously unscheduled meeting. In hindsight he should have scheduled it, but hindsight is perfect, and he was not. No matter how much certain members of peerage wanted to make it otherwise. Naruto's eye twitched. It seemed some of them decided to bring their familiar. He didn't really have an issue with that, but some of those familiars were bloody huge. Ayame brought her Oni, an Oni, into a room he really didn't want destroyed because someone managed to piss off the otherwise gentle giant. Come to think of it, that Oni reminded him a great deal of the Akamichi clan. Right down to his ability in the kitchen. That surprised everyone. After all, you don't expect a nearly 8-foot-tall giant of muscle to be capable of delicate seasoning. His name clinched the matter though, Tabimono, food. Yeah, Naruto couldn't think of anything to say to that. Actually, now that he thought about it, his peerage was filled with unique and/or powerful familiars. There was his own, Kurama. Makoto had a Yatagarzu, 3-legged crow. Hinata had an Undine. Tsukiko had been found by a young red dragon. The irony was not lost on him. Kakashi bonded with a rare breed of hellhound called a stormhound. Kurenai had a Garuda. And Yugao had somehow gotten a Kate Sidhi. How? Only the cat-like creature would know, and Greymalkin, asterisk as it called itself, was being violently tight-lipped. When a creature that can, literally, turn your spine into tea coasters tells you to drop the subject, you drop the subject. And those were just a few of them. Somehow his peerage had luck. With a capital L, it was beyond insane, and breached the realm of ridiculous. Shaking the thoughts from his head, he refocused on the members present, mentally adding their positions in the peerage to their names. On the couch to his left sat Amazon, Uzumaki Kushina, Bishop, Yuhi Kurenai, Nightmare, Mitarashi Anko, Princess, Hyuga Hinata, Pawn, Uchiha Tsukiko, and Pawn, Inuzuka Hana. Whereas on the couch to his right was seated Pawn, Hitaki Kakashi, Pawn, Ichiraku Ayame, Knight, Izuki Yugao, Knight, Gekko Hayate, Wazir, Mabui, Rook, Ni Yugito, and Pawn, Samui. Meanwhile, Empress, Uchiha Makoto was serving tea for everyone before taking up her self-appointed position at Naruto's left elbow. Looking around the room again, Naruto realized that he might want to invest in either larger couches or more furniture. Those couches each easily held 6 people each, but he needed more space. He was given a 22-piece evil piece set after all. Even if he only had 23 of that 26. Granted, 3 of his pieces had gone to Kakashi, but still. And for some reason Makoto refused to sit down during these meetings. Always seeming to want to display herself for him. Damned outfits. Naruto's brow twitched in slight irritation. Everyone was wearing the newest uniform Makoto had contrived, though some had personalized the color scheme. Kakashi had chosen a blue-lined black, Hinata had gone with lavender-lined white, Tsukiko apparently decided on red-lined black, and Anko seemed to the mold by trying a semi-transparent gold-lined violet. The rest simply chose the default colors that Makoto wore, though Hana added a leather collar, each one revealing the mark that denoted their particular evil piece. Naruto didn't know how long he could keep himself under control with all the beautiful women in such revealing attire. If Anko's knowing smirk was any indication, he had a viable target for retribution. Oh, he would make her pay for embarrassing him like this. Even if the sight of her in that outfit allowed a hint as to the seemingly lacy black underwear she had on. Damn it, he was getting distracted. Why did he change her into a devil again? A brief glance at the slightly apologetic expression on Kurenai's face reminded him. Oh yeah, Kurenai asked me to change Anko so she wouldn't simply outlive her best friend. Clearing his throat, Naruto called their attention to him. Alright, I know this meeting wasn't scheduled, but considering that Tsukiko, Hinata and I just finished the academy exam, I figured I'd see the direction of our future. Making eye contact with each of them he continued, now then, Kurenai, Kakashi, Anko, Hayate, and Yugito. You five were chosen by Sandaime Sama to become potential Jonin sensei. It's obvious I want Hinata and Tsukiko on my team, but at least one of you will have to ask for that specific grouping. While each of you has something to offer us in furtherance of our training, the question becomes, which one of you will present the most logical argument that Sandaime Sama could agree with? Kakashi stood from his spot. Actually, Naruto, it's most likely to be you, Tsukiko, and Inuzuka Kiba. You see, tradition seems to dictate that the Rookie of the Year and the top Kunoichi are paired with the year's dead last to try and even the skill values. It doesn't always work, but that's typically the way it goes. To change this so that you three, the three highest scores of the year, are teamed up, we would need one heck of an argument outside of, they work well together already. Actually, with that statement Hokage-sama is likely to see just how well you all did, and try to put you each on different teams to see if you can help bring up the overall skills. He sat back down as Naruto took in the information. Well, we can't have that, said the young man. He rested his elbows on the edge of his desk and clasped his hands together in front of his face, the very image of deep contemplation. Or heavy brooding, one of the two. Kakashi, of you five, who do you think is most likely to get that particular team? Of us five? I suppose I'm the most likely. Seeing as I was your father's student, and I'm the only one of us with the Sharingan to potentially teach Tsukiko more about it. Even though the Uchiha survived that night 8 years ago, and Itachi and Makoto are technically available to teach her further, Hokage-sama is probably going to go with me for her sensei and tack you on to try and create a kind of rival for Kiba to strive against. Kakashi replied in a lazy drawl, this time not bothering to rise. It wasn't like Naruto cared anyway. Kakashi may be Naruto's servant, but they were like brothers. I see. That can complicate things as you'd be more suited to a tracking team, as opposed to an assault team. Which is really what the team of Tsukiko, Kiba and I would most likely become, and Kiba is also more suited to tracking due to his Inuzuka clan training. I know that Tsume wouldn't neglect her son's training in that area, Naruto mused. Working his thoughts out loud like this allowed for easier flow and understanding. It also allowed for his peerage to give their own opinions on the subject. Which was invaluable to him, as they all had experience he lacked. He refused to be an arrogant fool and not use the resources available. Even if we can replace Kiba with Hinata, you'd still be an assault team, Naruto-sama. Kurenai stated in a soft voice. Even after all these years she had yet to drop the formalities with him. But with you using a sword we could possibly get Hayate as your sensei to continue your training with that. Yugao would be a better choice as she mastered several different weapon styles, but I doubt she'll leave Enbu anytime soon. Anko spoke up just then. Well, if our king wants Hinata and Tsukiko, I say we get him them. It can't really be that hard, Nai-chan. You've already pointed out that they would be an assault squad, so which of the potential teachers is the most assault-oriented? That's just it, Anko, Yugito replied. You, me, and Kakashi are the most suited to that. Kurenai's more of the support type, no offense Kurenai. Seeing the other woman's accepting nod, Yugito continued. Hayate could also fill the role of assault, being a kenjutsu specialist. What we need to think of isn't just terms of assault or support, but also other talents. Stealth, for instance. All three of them have a good grasp on this, so they are also particularly well suited to an assassination squad. On top of that, Naruto-sama has become very proficient with traps, while Hinata and Tsukiko have become rather good at finding said traps. Then there is the fact that each of them has actually bothered to pretty much master their own chosen ranged weapon, even going so far to become proficient with the ones the others chose. All in all, the Hokage would have a rather difficult time deciding. And yet, that is exactly what we must force him to do. Makoto finally spoke. Her voice was soft but firm, and seemingly echoing in the room despite its low volume. While it is undeniable that you three are stronger than the rest of your class, the Hokage does not know just how great that gap truly is. This leaves us with one choice, a clan head's request. You mean for either Kushina or myself to request of the Hokage for the formation of this team? Naruto stated in an even tone. That could work. Following that, I doubt we'd have any issue with whomever became our sensei. I suppose to make it seem a bit more legitimate, it should be Kushina to make the request. After all, even though I'm the clan head, she still commands more respect. Considering her former service record, that's not really surprising. Naruto-sama, Makoto threw her 2 cents in. And she had a point. Kushina was a former kunoichi, and a damn good one. One of the few in Konoha's history to reach the S rank. By this point she could probably be considered sulfur monosulfide rank, if only for the fact that she had not let up on her training and had continued to improve herself, inspiring the rest of the women in the compound to try and keep pace. Most failed, but most were human, not devil. Well then, perhaps we should decide on which of our prospective senseis we should have. Naruto asked, attempting to get things back on topic. As much fun as it would be, I doubt Kakashi would be the best choice, no offense meant. The older man just shrugged his shoulders agreeably. He was tardy to damn near everything. If he could, he'd arrange to be a minimum of 3 hours late to his own funeral. Well, that leaves Kurenai, Anko, Yugito, and Hayate. Personally, I don't know who I'd choose between them, Kushina mused, her rich voice sending shivers down Naruto's spine. Bad Naruto. No perverted thoughts about mom. Even if she is one of the hottest women I've ever seen. No. Bad. Oh, who am I kidding? If offered, I'd do her in a heartbeat. Why are all the women in my peerage so damned beautiful? Poor Naruto. Damned teenage hormones. If it's all the same to everyone, I'd put my vote for Yugito. All musings ceased as Ayame voiced her opinion. Well, think about it. She's skilled in stealth, assault, politics, assassination, shares the same fire affinity as the proposed team, is a fair hand at genjutsu even though she prefers taijutsu and ninjutsu. She's pretty much perfect for them. And what she can't do they can always bring in someone like Yuga or Hayate to cover. Naruto hummed lightly and thought. That does seem to have merit. Thinking about it a little more, he made his decision. Alright, we'll go with that. Yugito, you'll request the team under those premises. Now unless there is any other important information. He left the sentence hanging, clearly waiting to see if any of them had something. As a matter of fact, Naruto-sama, Hinata and I would like a private talk with you after this. Tsukiko stated, her voice a soft melody that was nonetheless firm in its slightly deeper tone. Very well, if there is nothing else? Looking around the room and receiving no other comments said, alright, then that will do it for today. As everyone stood and gave a small, polite bow, they then filed out of the room. Well, except for Tsukiko and Hinata. Once the last of the others had left, Hinata locked the doors, and sealed with a small silencing spell to allow no sound to travel beyond the room. Turning around she gave Tsukiko a quick nod. Naruto-sama, we wanted to know when you would be officially marrying us. We know that we couldn't while we were still civilians, but we are now shinobi, legal adults. Not to mention of consenting age, Tsukiko began, only to be interrupted by Hinata. Marriage? Tsukiko, I just wanted to know if he'd finally be screwing my brains out. I've waited all these years, and I simply refuse to let it go any longer. Let's face it, you want it too. Ranted the white-eyed girl, causing a blush to form quickly on Tsukiko's face. Unknown to Naruto, each of the 72 pillar families represented certain sins. Phoenix represented pride, Gremory was ambition, greed, Citri was oddly enough envy. There was an entire list of things. But the Uzumaki? Lust. The poor boy was practically pouring out those pheromones. Hinata giggled, "Don't worry, Naruto-sama. This was a safe day for both of us, and just on the off chance that it could happen anyway we have these nifty little seals on us. They render all sperm that enters our uterus impotent, courtesy of Kushina-sama." Naruto's eyes widened a little. "So Kushina knew about your plans? Well, at least it wasn't Anko. If you had gone to her I have no doubt the entire compound would have heard us, despite that silencing spell," he muttered. "Oh, yes, Naruto-sama," Tsukiko purred. Kushina-sama knew all about this little idea, and fully endorsed it. In point of fact, she rolled over and straddled his crotch again, rubbing herself against him. "Whoever said we were done just yet?" Naruto sighed, followed quickly by a large grin. This was going to be a long afternoon, and for some reason he didn't think he'd mind. Several hours later, Naruto was once again seated behind his desk, only this time he was doing some paperwork by the light of a small lamp. Tsukiko and Hinata had left about half an hour prior with wide, satisfied smiles on their faces, mirrored by Naruto's own. Life was good for Uzumaki Naruto today. With a sigh, Naruto leaned back into his chair, his paperwork dealing with his peerage's registration almost done. His thoughts turned not towards the virginity he just lost, but rather to some of the other members of his peerage he wanted to be intimate with. Makoto, Kushina, Hana, Yugito, Mabui, Samui, Anko, Kurenai. Looking down he grinned as he saw a head of silver hair, let loose from its usual bun, bouncing up and down his shaft. He could tick Mabui off that list. Mabui had shown up that same half-hour ago with his paperwork, having designated herself his assistant as she used to be from the Yondaime Raikage, before he sent her, Samui, and Yugito as a kind of apology, peace offering against the mistakes of their Sandaime Raikage. Specifically the attempted kidnapping of one Hyuga Hinata, and since Hinata had belonged to him since that incident so too did they as they were made into full Konoha kunoichi. Though Naruto still wondered what kind of strings were pulled to get Yugito, as the woman was the Jinchuriki of the Nibi, and as such was considered a major military resource. Mabui opted to turn her Hite aide in upon learning they wouldn't be serving the Hyuga heiress as she had initially believed but rather the Uzumaki heir. Having done that she then made the unilateral decision to be his assistant, as it would keep her from needing to leave the village or even commonly leave the compound. It wasn't as though she didn't like to mingle, but she already had a reputation as Kumogakure's top model, and as such she had no desire to be swarmed by the legions of fans she discovered she had in Konoha. And when it came time for Naruto to choose his wazir, Mabui was the first one to come to mind. With the teleportation circle it was a snap for her to travel just about anywhere she wanted. As a matter of fact, Mabui, Samui and Yugito were the ones who answered to requests within the borders of Kaminari no Kuni, Land of Lightning. Thus was she fully capable of getting away from her many fans whenever she desired. Not to mention when she had earned enough evil power, as his peerage was beginning to call their devil magic to obtain her familiar, she was found by a Raiju. A freaking thunder beast. The seeming coincidence of a Land of Lightning native getting taken by a thunder beast, a creature of living lightning, was hardly lost on anyone. Their guide, a man calling himself the familiar Master Zatoji, nearly had a fit though. Apparently he was considering either quitting his job, or committing suicide due to the number of heart attacks he received while working with Naruto's peerage and finding their familiars. Dropping one hand on top of Mabui's head, Naruto encouraged her to take more of him in her mouth even as his thoughts turned to Samui and Yugito. They came with her, as they refused to be split apart from the only other people they knew. As a result, when he asked Mabui to become part of his peerage, he had asked Samui and Yugito as well. When they agreed, he made them his pawn and rook, respectively. When asked why Samui was made into a pawn, he replied with, "She seems the most adaptive in combat out of you three, just like the pawn. The pawn is not a throwaway piece, and I will personally prank whoever says otherwise into a lovely white padded cell." Finding nothing wrong with his reasoning, and a little flattered that he would be so protective of them despite his obvious ill will toward Kumo, none of them had any further problem with their positions. Naruto snorted lightly as he remembered the familiar master's reaction to seeing his peerage again. Poor man nearly lost it right then and there. Yugito's reincarnation had worked similar to his own in that the Nibi was released from the seal imprisoning her, yet another of the Biju was female. Go figure, and just like Kurama, she decided to become Yugito's familiar. No explanations outside. I've grown fond of the kitten. Well, it wasn't like they could argue with that, now could they? Samui on the other hand practically validated Zadaji's position that Naruto's peerage was abnormal. She found a sylph. A spirit of the wind. It was as loquacious as Samui was not, and as one would expect she let the flowing of the wind determine her direction. It just so happened that when Samui was looking for a familiar, the sylph was floating on a breeze and ended up running smack dab into the woman. A stranger partnership Naruto has yet to see, not even the sight of Might Guy compared. Frightening thought. Officially scratch Mabui off the list, she was his. No words needed to be said as he rolled her over and thrust back in to begin another round. Damn, she was tight. Oh yeah, today was turning out to be a very good day. Though he'd be certain to pay attention to her this time around, otherwise it would be like he didn't care. Mabui saw his gaze rivet itself upon her as she looked over her shoulder at him, and she smiled. Nothing really ruined good like one party not paying attention. She smiled again, this time to herself. She was now Uzumaki Mabui. With this act and a promise she made as they copulated, she was his, and his alone. And as far as the devil or shinobi communities were concerned, that was all that was needed to be called a member of that clan and family. Tears of happiness trailed from her eyes briefly at this thought. She had a clan, she was part of a family, and she would be bearing her husband's children in time. Yes, Uzumaki Mabui was very happy. Unknown to them, a reddish-pink mark of an upside-down rook chess piece just under her throat began to glow slightly. About 2 hours later, Naruto made his way to his bed. Team assignments may not be for a week, but that was no reason to start slacking off, now was it? And part of keeping one's self in shape was a god amount of rest. Opening his bedroom door, he bore witness to a sight straight out of his fantasies. Uchiha Makoto, Inuzuka Hana, and Uzumaki Kushina, in semi-transparent red and black lace teddies, moaning as they fought amongst each other for domination in a three-way kiss. Each of their respective evil piece marks giving off a light glow. Kushina's knight atop an inverted queen's crown was a bit brighter than the others. "Mao, that's hot," was the only thought Naruto could find within him at that moment. Taking notice of their audience, all three women smirked in a purely seductive fashion. "Oh, Naruto-sama tilde." Makoto purred while running one hand down her body. "Why don't you join us? After all this is yours." She ran that same hand over Kushina and Hana as well, indicating exactly what she meant, even as she licked her lips when her eyes saw the unmistakable bulge within his pants. "I'm going to die by, and I can't think of a better way to go." Oh yes, it was good to be Uzumaki Naruto. And so the week passed with training, preparing, and ungodly amounts of. And now Naruto stood in the entranceway of his home, flanked by Tsukiko and Hinata. All three in a different kind of outfit from normal, as they each had discarded their original clothing choices in favor of a more uniform look. Each of them now wore a relatively simple-looking ensemble. Dark charcoal-colored leather leggings, soft-looking wool boots, their crisscrossing belts with most of their shinobi gear sealed away into scrolls hanging from said belts. Their shirts were also now a dark charcoal leather, with a thin chain mesh underneath, the girls leaving it open slightly at the neck to display a portion of cleavage and their individual marks. Over this went an ankle-length hooded cloak randomly patterned in darker grays, greens, and browns. Altogether they made for a rather impressive sight, and when they put those hoods on their faces became shrouded in shadow, giving them a grim appearance that belied their natural looks. These were no longer children, these were shinobi. These were people who would kill and die for their home. As the three left for the academy one final time, Kushina and Makoto couldn't help the smiles of pride and joy as they watched them walk. Their king, their master, their loving husband, and those two girls would show the shinobi world what the Uzumaki clan could do once more. No one would know what hit them. Naruto, Tsukiko, and Hinata had arrived at the academy early. Upon entering the building they quickly located the appropriate room and took their usual seats in the far back corner, where the shadows were deepest and the view of the door unrestricted. And there they sat, waiting patiently for all the others who had passed, their forms hidden in the folds of their cloaks even as the hoods hid their faces, their hite resting upon their foreheads under the hood so as not give them away by accidentally reflecting light. As they waited, the three of them had a low conversation about potential teams, on the off chance that they weren't together. Hinata was of the opinion that she might get put with Kiba and Shino as a tracking team, just as her father was placed with Kiba's mother and Shino's father. It wasn't necessarily a bad idea, given each of them had techniques suited for both tracking and scouting. The Inuzuka's enhanced sense of smell, the Hyuga's Byakugan eyes, and the Abarame's Kakaichu that were incredibly sensitive to vibration so as to cover an enhanced sense of hearing. That team could potentially work, if not for one problem: Kiba. Inuzuka Kiba, a glory-seeking Neanderthal with alpha dog issues. 6 years ago, he attempted to force Hinata into becoming his mate, unknowing or uncaring of the fact that she was already promised and bound to Naruto. Kiba's entire plan was to get a kiss from Hinata, then use that opportunity to cop a feel of even more, followed by saying with that kiss she had chosen him. Flashback. Kiba got as far as laying his hand on Hinata's shoulder in preparation to turning her around for that kiss before he found himself thrown off balance, landing face first into Hinata's still developing bust, knocking them both to the ground. This unfortunately also had the end result of Kiba being able to get a good feel of Hinata's butt as well before she managed to throw him off, shrieking at him for trying to take liberties. The boy had just smirked and replied that she was his, and he would have her whether she wanted to be or not. This statement incensed every other person there, Kiba's mother especially. Inuzuka Sume, the mother in question, was both furious and ashamed at her son's actions and words. This kind of behavior was only barely tolerated within their own clan, and even then it had to be mutually agreed upon. Kiba was essentially saying that Hinata had no choice, that she was to be his obedient slave and plaything. Now this was something that Sume would not tolerate. Even an alpha still had to listen to the opinions of others, as the guiding principle of the Inuzuka clan was live free. This was not meant to mean that they could do whatever they wanted, but rather that they should respect everyone's choices and free will. And Kiba, her stupid son, was disrespecting the clan's founding value. On top of that, he was disrespecting the Hyuga and Uzumaki clans as well. Sume may have been able to overlook many things, but this wasn't going to be one of them, as she knew that Hinata was already promised to Naruto, and this act would require strong reparations. After all, her son had just publicly and politically embarrassed the Inuzuka clan, while giving grave insult to 2 other clans. Sighing, she strode over to her son and cuffed him in the ear. Kiba turned to his mother. "What was that for, Mom?" "This is how it works. The male dominates and controls the female. With this she's become mine. You won't have to worry about anything," he practically shouted, defending his actions. "You little fool. Hyuga Hinata is promised and bound to Uzumaki Naruto. She has been for years. I told you this, and yet you seem to have ignored me. Me, your own mother, and alpha of our clan." Sume berated him loudly, all in front of an ever-growing crowd. Suddenly seeming to calm down, she continued in a low but authority-laden voice, "Do you understand just what you've done? You have disrespected not only the Hyuga clan, for assuming their traditions are similar to ours, but the Uzumaki to whom the girl is sworn to. To add further insult, you also disregarded our own clan's primary principle by attempting to force yourself on this girl." Seeing Kiba's eyes widening at the realization of everything, she went on. "Do you know, Kiba, just what it is I am forced to do in order to atone our very clan's reputation? All for your one stupid act?" Kiba just shook his head mutely. He had no idea. He merely wanted to be able to gloat that he had the single most desired girl in Konoha as his. To be able to do anything he wanted to her. Now he was learning that she was already promised, and to a loser like the Uzumaki? It simply didn't compute for him. Sume, seeing her son's head swimming with thoughts for once, went in for the kill, so to speak. "I'm forced to offer one of our clan to the offended parties as their servant. And not just anyone, either. It must be one of my own children, as it was one of my children to offend. Now, obviously, they wouldn't accept you, as you began all this. However, I have one other child, your sister, Hana. She will have to pay the price for your actions this day, Kiba." This was delivered in a solemn tone, and for once in his life, Inuzuka Kiba was appalled. His elder sister, Hana, who was like a second mother to him, would be taking his place. She would be forced into service to Uzumaki? His face suddenly shadowed itself under his hair before looking up in determination. Not today, or ever. Kiba rushed Naruto from behind. The other boy was holding Hinata in a one-armed embrace, his nails sharpening in an instinctual use of his chakra. Before he could take even a half-dozen steps though, Sume caught his outstretched hand in an iron grip. "And just what were you planning to do with this, young man?" the woman asked in an angry voice. She had known he was foolish, but had hoped he wasn't that stupid. "What else? I was going to rip his throat out, save Hana-ne-chan from him, and get Hinata. He doesn't deserve either of them." Okay, so maybe it was a forlorn hope. The brat had just tried to kill someone, a fellow resident of Konoha, and a clan heir. So much for not being that stupid. What you believe aside, Kiba, due to your actions, earlier, and just now again, our clan is in a precarious position. As my new heir, since I'll be giving Hana as a servant, you will now need to think before you do or say anything. Sume scolded him. This was not going the way Kiba planned it. He was supposed to get a kiss, claim his girl, and be set for life, while watching Naruto despair. Now it was Kiba who was in despair, as the full weight of his actions slammed down on him, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. Well, he could commit seppuku ritual suicide, but he was 10 years old. He had way too much to live for, too many females to dominate and make his. Yeah, with this little stunt that dreams suddenly became a lot more distant. There wasn't much. As they now represented the base of the shinobi corps, they had an obligation to not make the others chunin and higher look bad by pulling stupid stunts, or being belligerent when on duty. The main perks of being a genin were being recognized as an official adult, meaning drinking alcohol and all the other fun adult stuff was now permissible, and being allowed to buy proper shinobi equipment assuming you were civilian and didn't have a clan armory. It wouldn't allow Naruto to take up his seat on the shinobi council, but he didn't want to either, so it worked out for him. "Once more, we give you congratulations on passing," Itachi repeated, causing Naruto to zone back in, hoping the lecture was over. "I will now begin splitting you up into your 3-man teams. Do not argue with me over the choices as they were made by the Hokage. You have a problem, take it up with him." Now, Team 1, Naruto zoned out again. Really, what did he care about the others? He would just keep his ear out for certain names, his, Tsukiko's, and Hinata's, and see about ignoring the rest. Team 7, under Hitaki Kakashi, Aburame Shino, Inazuka Kiba. Here Hinata started praying she wasn't on that list, and Haruno Sakura. Hinata gave a large sigh of relief. She could easily deal with anyone else if it came down to being split away from Naruto. Considering how well Sakura took the assignment, Itachi had to wonder if her fangirl tendencies were just an act. If so, they were damned effective. He had been expecting her to explode and demand to know why he wasn't to be her Jonin sensei. Instead, Itachi received a small smirk that clearly stated Sakura got pretty much what she wanted. Team 8, under Ni Yugito, Hyuga Hinata, Uchiha Tsukiko, and Uzumaki Naruto. The three of them held an impromptu group hug, startling the civilian born in the room sans Sakura. They hadn't even been noticed. Another good mark in Naruto's book. Team 9 is still in circulation from last year. Team 10, under Sarutobi Asuma, Akamichi Choji, Nara Shikamaru, and Yamanaka Ino. Itachi was interrupted at this point by Ino suddenly squealing and wrapping her two friends in a giant hug. Well, at least she wasn't ranting in an overly sharp voice about things not being fair, or some such stupidity. Iruka spoke up, "Your Jonin sensei will be here in 1 hour, so take this time to acclimate yourselves to your new teams." Here he paused as he looked at Naruto and his two girls. A silent and unspoken, "Even if you don't feel the need to," passing between them. "And be ready to learn even more in the future." Dismissed. The students broke apart after that, Naruto's little group heading for the roof. While they needed no bonding time, they didn't want to be stuck in that room for the next hour, possibly dealing with Kiba. Arriving on the rooftop, they took note of a little gazebo-type area covered in vines and small flowers to provide a bit of shade from the unrelenting sun, and 2 potted trees on either side of the door. They chose to take the gazebo. Sitting down on the step-like floor under the shade, they each pulled out a scroll, unrolled it, then unsealed a single-serving meal created by Kushina before they left. As Naruto ate, he reveled in the quiet atmosphere of the space he was in. So calm, with a slight breeze passing through to keep them cool. It was beautiful, serene, terrific. Then Inuzuka Kiba came through the door, obviously looking for them, his two new teammates following behind. "There you are, loser. I was starting to think you had just run away in fear of a true alpha," Kiba taunted, hoping to get a rise out of Naruto. Did you say something?" was Naruto's lazy reply. Somewhere else in Konoha, a gray-haired man reading a book had the sudden urge to fist pump. This response was not what Kiba was looking for, and it showed in his instant scowl. "I'm talking to you, loser. I'm challenging you to a fight for Hinata, and to regain my sister from your worthless clutches," Kiba sneered. He knew Naruto couldn't deny him. They were both clan heirs and as such had equal political standing. He knew he could take him, even though Naruto had the best time on the exams. Kiba felt certain in his victory. Behind Kiba, his teammates frowned. Well, Sakura frowned. It was damned impossible to tell what Shino's expression was, but from his body posture he wasn't happy. No, came Naruto's deadpan reaction. He hadn't even bothered to look at Kiba. "Why would I fight you for my bride? She gave herself to me not even a day after the exam." Tsukiko was even there, a hot little threesome, Naruto stated in that same deadpan voice, as if discussing the weather. Then later that night, Hana joined in a foursome, giving herself over to me as well. With the actions done and words said, that night they are mine as definitively as if we'd had a full wedding. Team 7 was gobsmacked. Even Shino was easy to read, thus giving silent testimony to just how shocked each of them were. However, even in his shocked state of mind, Kiba was easily able to piece together the underlying information. Hinata solely belonged to Naruto now. There was no chance of ever separating them save by death, preferably Naruto's, and there was no possible way to release his sister from her previous servitude as she had gone and married her master. In short, Kiba's challenge was void. There was no reason for Naruto to accept, and nothing Kiba could gain outside of possible satisfaction as it was against the Konoha clan charter to fight for someone else's mate. Even Naruto's death wouldn't get him Hinata now, as she was effectively Uzumaki Hinata, the bastard's wife and member of his clan. Kiba felt his world crumbled to pieces around him. His plan had been perfect, or so he'd thought. Wait it out, graduate the academy, be patient, become a genin and then challenge Naruto. Everything was going to plan, but now, it all fell apart. And there was no reason to not believe Naruto's claim, as both Hinata and Tsukiko were nodding in silent agreement. Kiba's mind broke, not in denial, but in the realization of the irrefutable truth. Hinata could never be his. This one fact knocked him out of his sudden stupor, and straight into a homicidal rage. And in this rage, he attacked. He didn't attack Naruto, though. No, he attacked Hinata, screaming about how she should have been his bitch, to be made into nothing more than his personal cum dumpster. However, Hinata was not such an easy target to be taken down by one enraged and unthinking genin. She ducked and weaved away from Kiba's anger-strengthened attacks, waiting patiently for her chance to counterattack. Naruto and the others just watched. Sakura and Shino in disbelief that Kiba would attack Hinata of all people, while Naruto and Tsukiko merely felt no need to interfere. They knew just how strong Hinata really was, and knew that Kiba would never so much as scratch her porcelain skin. Just as Hinata was about to strike out at an opening in Kiba's attacks, the young man was brought down by another person sitting on him. This person was none other than Hitaki Kakashi, his silver gray hair defying gravity as normal. "What do you think you are doing, Genin Inuzuka? You are assaulting a fellow shinobi of Konoha. You should know that is forbidden outside expressly given consent or registered training grounds, of which the academy roof is not one of. Now explain yourself." Kakashi snapped, clearly angry with Kiba's actions. "If I do not receive a satisfactory answer immediately, I will recommend you to be dropped from the Shinobi Corps," the elder man continued when no answer was forthcoming. "Anyo, Hitaki-san," Hinata began before being interrupted by Sakura. "Wait, this is our new sensei?" Sakura exclaimed. "Apparently, Haruno-san," Shino replied in a monotone voice they had become used to over the years. Turning to Kakashi, Shino started to give his account of the proceedings, beginning with the after receiving their teams and leading up to Kiba snapping. He left nothing out, he edited nothing, not Kiba's actions, not his words, nor did he edit anything Naruto had said. When his telling was done, his former classmates stared at him in slight awe. They had never heard so many words from the quiet boy before. Kakashi sighed, and bound Kiba's hands behind his back. While your honesty is commendable, Genin Aburame, I was hoping it would be more than an over-obsessed idiot realizing he can't have a certain girl. Now I have to take him to torture and interrogation to see if he's even still fit for duty, then make a trip to see Hokage-sama and inform him of the situation. And then I must inform Sume-san about her son's actions. This is not going to end well. With one last sigh, Kakashi threw the bound and unresponsive Kiba over his shoulder. Genin Aburame, Genin Haruno, you two are report to Training Ground 7 tomorrow morning, 0900, for continued training as shinobi. Dismissed, and do not speak of what happened here today, to anyone. The man then vanished with Kiba in a Konoha Shunshin, supposedly off to T&I. Naruto shook his head in pity. Kiba hadn't stood a chance. He watched briefly as Sakura and Shino left the roof by the same door they used to get there. Taking a glance at the sun's position, he estimated they only had about 15 minutes left of there. Rising from his place, he went over to Hinata and pulled her into his embrace, running one hand through her hair while his other made small circle motions on her back to calm and reassure her that the incident was over. The girl in his arms broke into tears, and Tsukiko looked on in sympathy before joining in the hug to impart what comfort she could to her fellow bride. In one stroke, they had destroyed the mind of a young man, effectively killing him, ending his career before it truly began. To do this was painful, even more since it was a fellow shinobi of their village. Someone they had been taught to see as a brother, a comrade. And while it was painful, and she cried over the loss of a potential brother in arms, Hinata could not find it in her to feel regret. Kiba had made his choices, and she had made hers. All they could do now was to live with the consequences. 15 minutes later found the trio back in their place at the rear of the classroom. Hinata was very glad for the deep shadows her hood afforded her, so she could hide the small signs of distress that were still evident. She did not want people thinking that Naruto might have done something she didn't want. She did not want to be seen as less than his perfect Hyuga bride. She did not want anyone to see the tiniest spark of satisfaction that she knew resided within her eyes. No longer would Kiba hound her, pun intended. No longer would he pursue her for her hand, despite knowing she was already given to Naruto. No longer would she have to hear his ranting about how she should be with a true alpha, like him, and leave the loser to his certain early death. No longer would she have to deal with Inuzuka Kiba. She was free of him and his incessant cajoling and commanding and begging and whining. Hinata was not by nature a vindictive woman, but Kiba had pushed her well past her point. Thus did she silently revel in his departure, all the while wondering if Naruto could feel her elation somehow. As Hinata sat in silent contemplation, the classroom door opened and in walked several people. She only took note of a few, however: Ni Yugito, Sarutobi Asuma, Kurenai Yuhi, Mitarashi Anko, and Gekko Hayate. Ni Yugito was a blonde beauty, on a level that Ino could only hope to achieve. In deference to her new home of Konoha, Yugito had all but abandoned her previous style of dress in favor of Konoha's typical Jonin attire of dark loose-fitting pants wrapped at the ankle with a kunai holster attached to her right thigh, dark blue long-sleeved shirt underneath a dark green flak vest, and her hite ate in place proudly upon her brow. She kept her hair out of the way in a long wrapped ponytail, and her dark eyes sparkled with life and a sense of adventure. She may not have been tall, topping out just over 5.5 feet, but her well-proportioned body was easily visible despite the loose clothing. Sarutobi Asuma, on the other hand, was a tall man easily passing 6 feet in height, with black hair and beard. He wore the standard Konoha Jonin uniform with the small addition of a sash around his waist that bore the kanji for fire, the sign he was once part of the Fire Daimyo's personal 12 shinobi guardians. Asuma kept his hair short and bound out of his face by his hite, and what seemed to be a permanently bent cigarette in his mouth. Whether he ever actually lit it was something Hinata was uncertain of. Then there was Kurenai Yuhi. Hinata had to admit the woman had only gotten more beautiful over the last several years. Her shoulder-length black hair had a natural lustrous sheen to it, wavy locks, and her red eyes spoke of confidence and capability. Hinata snorted briefly. Those red eyes were constantly getting Kurenai mixed up with the Uchiha clan, despite being perfectly normal amongst the females of the Yuhi. Hinata quickly brought herself back to Kuranai, more specifically her dress. If you could call interlocking bandages over sleeveless chain mesh and a one-armed crimson blouse a dress. Under the dress could be seen leg wrappings, probably to hide what shouldn't be seen without permission, and to finish the look a pair of common shinobi sandals, while her hands and forearms were bandaged. Following her was Mitarashi Anko, a more sultry temptress Konoha had never seen, even if she did prefer women. Short violet hair held in a high ponytail resembling a pineapple much like Shikamaru, her deep brown eyes held promises of untold ual pleasure. Pleasure that she would never give to any but a chosen few. What a sadist, she'd probably get along well with Naruto's cousin's queen. What was her name again? Oh yes, Himejima Akeno. Anko's style of dress had changed very little since joining Naruto's peerage though. Previously she wore a mesh bodysuit, burnt orange miniskirt, tan trench coat, greaves over black shinobi sandals, and small stinger-like pendant on a cord around her neck. Now, she had removed the mesh bodysuit, replacing it with a simple chain mesh undershirt, over which she decided to wear a small black tube top. That was it. It left absolutely nothing to the imagination, putting Anko's nearly voluptuous body on full display. Hinata released a small sigh of relief when Yugito called for Team 8 to follow her out the door. She loved her sisters in the peerage, but Anko was hard to deal with at the best of times. And by the fact the woman sent Hinata a knowing smirk, she possibly knew something about the situation with Kiba that no one else did. Not surprising, really. The woman was second in command of Konoha T&I department, right behind one Morino Ibiki. If Hinata wished to fool Anko, she had many more years of practice ahead of her to even dream of such a thing. So Hinata quietly filed out after Yugito, hoping that Anko wouldn't say anything until she was ready. Quite possibly a forlorn hope. Each of Konoha's teams were given a training area in accordance with their number. As such, it was no surprise that Yugito led them to Training Ground 8. A wooded area of decent size with a fair amount of meadow to practice taijutsu or ninjutsu in, and pads wrapped around a few of the trees at the edge on one side for striking practice. A small stream meandered through the grounds on the northern end, giving the area a serene feeling. Turning to face her new team, Yugito spoke in a simple no-nonsense tone. Well, welcome to the Shinobi Corps. Normally I'm supposed to test you on your teamwork before stating that, however, that would be pointless as I know you work well together. So we can skip that. To begin your training I'll be testing your individual combat skills, stealth and reconnaissance, trap-making, you know, everything. She paused and looked at Naruto with a serious expression. Something I feel I must note is this. There can be no favoritism on this team, Naruto-sama. As such I shall be treating you no better or worse than Tsukiko or Hinata. Yugito continued, the rich tones of her voice easily soothing the three's nerves. It was here that Naruto held up a hand. I never expected, nor wished for, such favoritism, Yugito-sensei, he said with a husky accent at the end. I fully expect you to run me into the ground with training, pick me up, then run me even further. Hinata and Tsukiko just nodded in tandem. They fully agreed with him, they would get nothing out of being babied. They wanted a training regimen that would push them to become the best. Blinking slightly at having her momentum halted, Yugito paused to regain her thoughts. Very well, at least you know what will be good for your career and continued existence. Now, we have been determined to be a first response style of team. Can I assume at least one of you know what this means? All three of her new students nodded, and Hinata spoke up. It means that whatever the situation, we are to be ready to deal with it. Be it guard duty, escort, assassination, invasion of Konoha, or any of 1,000 and more scenarios. Yugito nodded. Good, they knew what would be expected of them. Most teams she had dealt with in the past had been greener than the tree leaves surrounding this village. In the 8 years since she and her friends were given to Konoha, and further to the Uzumaki, Yugito had passed exactly 2 teams. The only one who could boast a smaller number was Kakashi, but he played evil little mind games. Okay, so did she, but that's not the point. Her mental point was simply that her standards were incredibly high. If there was no teamwork, she failed them. If there was no individual skills, she failed them. If there was no proper motivation, she failed them. She had a few pieces to her criteria, but those were perhaps the most important. Everything else they could learn. So now, here she was once again, with a trio of young minds ready for instruction. Teamwork? Check. Individual skills? Check. Proper motivation? Well, they all wanted to make their parents proud, but they also wanted to protect those dear to them. Check. Ni Yugito, Jonin sensei of Team 8, gave an evil smile. If they weren't cursing her by the end of the day, she would simply increase her regimen. A true devil. That was the unanimous decision between the 3 students of Ni Yugito. She has sparred with each of them individually, working all 3 into the ground, then giving them a rest while she tested the next in line. She followed this with 2-person drills, any combination of Naruto, Tsukiko and Hinata. Then finally all 3 together. Apparently finding them satisfactory, Yugito went on to outline the bare basics of their new training. Just thinking about it made Naruto's muscles ache. But they had asked for it, and they refused to back down. The fact Yugito made it all look so easy, sparring for several hours with nary a sign of fatigue, not even a hair out of place, and then stating that what she was going to put them through just drove it home how far they had yet to go. They were strong for Genin, they could maybe pass as low-ranked Chunin, but they were far from Jonin. That thought felt oddly reassuring to each of them. It seemed to validate the ages-old saying of, no matter how much you think you know, there is always more to learn. And learn they would. The very thought of possibly disappointing their Yugito sensei seemed to twist and stab them. They resolved, each in their own way, to make her proud of them as her students. Upon entering the Uzumaki compound, all 3 headed straight for the private onsen. They were filthy and dead tired. The hot water would easily soothe all the aches and pains, not to mention they could slough off the dirt and grime. Maybe give the girls some heavy petting. Somewhere in no Kuni, hot spring country, a white-haired man peeping in a local bathhouse felt the sudden urge to visit Konoha for inspirational research, only to find out he had been discovered and surrounded by the women he had been spying on, each one somehow having gotten hold of blunt objects and wearing expressions to scare the original Mao. High-pitched screams of pain were heard for miles. As the 3 of them sat and luxuriated in the hot water of the onsen, each of them allowed their minds to drift. No particular topics, just random thoughts of no importance. At least until one particular idea passed into Tsukiko's mind. Considering it for a moment, she decided to voice it as a question. Naruto-sama, not that I'm complaining, but why is it that despite all that you've been having this past week, only Mabui and Hana have gotten pregnant? Tsukiko's voice was filled with simple curiosity. After all, she didn't want children of her own just yet, so it wasn't really a problem. Humming for a moment, Naruto seemed to be thinking about the best phrase his reply. Well, from what Kushina has told me, it seems to have something to do with those marks, the evil pieces left on us. Apparently they act as a kind of filter seal, either ensuring or denying the potency of my sperm based upon the will of both parties involved. Mabui and Hana wanted children, I wanted to give them that happiness, so the marks made pregnancy a certainty. None of the rest of you want children just yet, so it causes my seed to become impotent. The explanation made sense, to a degree. But it brought up another question. No one else seemed to have these marks upon their peerage, so why did they? It had to have something to do with the pink coloring to some of the pieces like Tsukiko's own, but what exactly caused it? As if anticipating her next question, Naruto said in a tired voice, don't worry. I know what caused the pieces to do this. Or at least I have a theory. I've yet to run it past Kushina, though. When I do, I'll bring it up in one of the scheduled meetings. Giving sounds of agreement, the 2 girls looked over at him with sympathetic expressions and moved in closer. They weren't going to try anything, they simply wanted to be closer to him. Each rested a head on one of his shoulders, his arms snaking around their shoulders to draw them in a little closer. This would be enough for now, just to bask in each other's presence. A few hours later found Naruto heading to his office, having been told of an unexpected guest. Naturally, this meant that as head of the Uzumaki, even if unofficially, he had to greet them properly. Courtesy and all that. Upon opening the door to his office, Naruto was somewhat surprised at what he saw waiting for him. Or rather, he should say, whom? A crimson-haired girl roughly his own age sat on one of the couches, being served tea by Makoto. A very beautiful girl wearing some kind of school uniform. A very familiar girl. Gulping quietly, Naruto said with some trepidation, hello, Rias. What brings you here? Rias Gremory, cousin to Uzumaki Naruto, just sat quietly on the couch and sipped at her tea. A calm and placid expression upon her face gave away nothing as Naruto maneuvered around to his place behind his desk, where Makoto offered him a cup as well. Nothing was said for a number of uncounted minutes. Naruto took to size up and take stock of his unanticipated guest. Her bright crimson hair hung free down her back to well past her generous derriere. If she had been standing, her height would top at approximately 5 foot and 4 inches, meaning that with some seriously long hair he wondered briefly at the amount of care necessary to maintain that much hair. She sat comfortably in what Naruto could only assume to be her school's uniform, or at least part of it. A white long-sleeved, button-down shirt with a black ribbon on her shirt collar worn under a black shoulder cape and a matching button-down corset, a magenta skirt with white accents, and brown dress shoes over white crew-length socks. Naruto was suddenly glad he had taken a few moments to change out of his shinobi clothes and into an informal men's kimono. Rias was almost certainly here for personal reasons. Setting down her tea, Rias turned her gaze to him, her green-blue eyes reflecting the serious nature of whatever it was she wanted to speak about. Naruto-kun, I have recently been made aware of 2 different contracts for my hand in marriage. One does not specifically designate me, but rather the Gremory family heir. The other states, Rias Gremory. I must admit I was surprised. Father had shown me the first contract once when mother was not home, and I'm quite certain that I've mentioned it to you on any number of occasions, considering my revulsion towards the agreed-upon party in that contract. One riser Phoenix is quite well known, she began, staring at him with an unfathomable expression. Imagine my surprise then, Rias continued, as if completely oblivious to the rising nervousness easily viewed on Naruto's face, when, not 2 days ago, my brother, Sirzechs Lucifer, comes to me bearing a sealed marriage contract. This one naming myself, specifically by name, and one Uzumaki Naruto, signed and sealed 10 years ago. Here the young woman's eyes gained a dangerous glint within their ocean-like depths. Now, would you be so kind as to tell me the reason you never mentioned I had an out clause from that first contract practically at my fingertips for the entire time we've known each other, Naruto-kun? Rias dragged his name out, one syllable at a time, each part said with so much honey sweetness that he almost choked on it. Now, Naruto was definitely in trouble. He had intended to tell her about the contract between them for a number of years, but the timing never seemed quite right. Something would always crop up just as he was about to broach the subject, thus ruining the moment. Besides, saying something like, "Oh yeah, that marriage with Riser can be avoided if you marry me instead," just seemed weird. Not to mention arrogant, egotistical, and self-serving. Naruto sighed, the tension leaving his body. I tried, many times. I tried on that day when we used the evil piece to bring Kushina back. I tried 6 months later during the summer, and every other time we were together for longer than an hour. However, every time I was going to bring it up, something else occurred, from receiving your own evil pieces, to finding a Kano, all the way to your nephew's birth a few years ago, Milika's, right? Finally I gave up, figuring that eventually it would come to light on its own. Besides, if you read it thoroughly, you'd find it's dependent upon your acceptance. His calm, even tone did wonders to soothe the young girl. Apparently explaining things in a calm and rational fashion actually worked. Go figure. Makoto, who had been standing in her usual place to Naruto's left, decided to speak up. May I see this contract, Rias-sama? Rias looked at her in surprise, having forgotten the older woman was even in the room. How rude. When the request finally managed to make sense to her, Rias gave a nod and summoned up a copy of the contract with the aid of a magical circle, before handing it over. Slightly inclining her head, Makoto then reached out to take the rolled-up parchment. Opening and reading the contents, Makoto's face lit with understanding. It says here, Rias-sama, that should you agree to this, you would be removed from the position as heir of the Gremory, which I am assuming is why it would nullify your prior contract. In exchange for this, the Uzumaki would be giving up their singular rights to the elemental nations and instead sharing them with the Gremory. Should you decline, however, this contract goes on to state that another shall be chosen in your place. At these words, Rias' ire with Naruto died, evaporating as if it never was. Looking past Naruto through the large window into the courtyard one-way glass was so nice, she lost herself in trying to determine which path she would take, as she figured she had 3 basic choices. First, she could agree, be removed as the heiress of the Gremory, and become Naruto's wife. Second, she could refuse, accept Riser as her husband Shudder, and doom herself to a fate worse than death. Third, she could contest one or both of the contracts, and fight for her freedom. She immediately rejected the second option. Riser would not be getting her, she would commit suicide before allowing that miserable excuse for a male to so much as touch her. This left her with options 1 and 3. Both had their perks, both had their problems. Option 3 had previously been her option 1. A fight, or rating game, pitting her peerage as incomplete as it was against either Naruto or Riser. Actually, Naruto would simply let her go, so that left fighting Riser. Last she heard he had nearly a complete peerage, while she only had 4. If Rias was to be honest with herself, she didn't honestly see how she and her queen, rook, knight, and a sealed-away bishop could possibly win. It wasn't a matter of a lack of faith, rather it was experience and numbers. In both areas Riser had her beat, as much as it galled her to admit. While she might argue for superior quality and sheer talent, that would only take them so far. This would lead to her becoming nothing more than Riser's pet, and her peerage would be the man's to command, including the addition or subtraction of members. Basically he could force her to only have female members, and then have his way with them. She held no delusions. This was what would happen should she marry Riser Phoenix. The man had a reputation for jumping in and out of bed with any woman he found physically attractive, and an ego to match or surpass his magic capacity. On the other hand, there was accepting to become Naruto's bride, or option 1. Her mind briefly wondered why she was going backward before it was shrugged off as inconsequential. In any case, taking this route was possibly the easiest. Naruto was a good man, handsome, charismatic, and being his wife probably wouldn't be too arduous. He valued his peerage and their opinions, treated like family, and was even married to a few of them technically if what she suspected about the silver-haired woman was true. He had men in his peerage, one of those men was the lover, fiancé to one of the women in the same peerage, the other seemed content with the bachelor life. One of the other women in Naruto's peerage was supposedly in a relationship with one of the human retainers, while 2 more were said to be lesbian lovers. The only downside she could see to becoming Naruto's bride would be her removal as the Gremory heir. Not a big thing, really. It just meant that she would no longer be the one to inherit the responsibilities of the family head. She would still represent them to a degree, but her words and actions would, from that point on, reflect more upon Naruto than the Gremory. She wouldn't even lose her peerage. She was still a daughter of the Gremory, and a high-class devil. Her peerage wouldn't be taken from her. Or at least, her right to have one. Naruto even seemed to genuinely want to know Rias as a person instead of as the Gremory heiress. Of course this was obvious as the contract between them was for her, specified by the use of her name, not her title. He had also made attempts to seem like a normal boyfriend with casual touches to her shoulders or hands, giving her massages, taking her for lunch or dinner, or just spending time with her. Wait a minute. Rias' eyes suddenly cut to Naruto's, boring deep into them as if all the answers to the universe were contained within. Tell me, Naruto-kun, Rias said softly, with an intensity that made it clear she needed the honest truth from him. Over the years, when you would visit me during the holidays, and you would ask me questions about myself, was all of that idle curiosity, or were you trying to prepare for being in a relationship with me? Naruto gulped. This was it. This answer would make her it all. To be honest, a little of both. I wanted to know about you because I was curious as to who you were as a person. I knew about the contract, obviously, so I felt I needed to know just who might be my wife one day. Each time you exceed my hopes, in proving you weren't a spoiled little girl, your brother's actions and opinions aside. You weren't a snob, you didn't think you were above others, and you didn't force anything on anyone. I grew to admire you, and that slowly became something more. He paused for a moment, returning her gaze with a serious expression to let her know just how much he meant the following words. I came to love you, Rias. I fell for the little girl who wouldn't stop nagging me to play with her, for the young lady that wanted to just snuggle up on a couch and watch anime, and for the woman before me now, who knows what she wants in life. Taking a deep breath, Naruto continued his thoughts while resting his head on folded hands. I won't force you into the contract, Rias. If you should choose to fight it, I'll let you go and be content in that it was your choice. And I'll root for you when you fight Riser, because I have come to know you. He doesn't deserve you, Rias. I don't really think anyone does, not even me, but as I said, it's all up to you. Rias just stared into his eyes for what seemed like forever, before asking her next question, her voice never rising from her previous soft tone. If I were to choose you, Naruto-kun, what would you do with me and my peerage? We would be at your disposal. As my husband, the laws of devilkind will bind them to you as surely I will be. Her hands started to shake a little, betraying her agitation. It seems this was a major sticking point for her. Naruto nodded in recognition of her dilemma. Rias was a Gremory who, like the Uzumaki, put family before all else, and your servants were family, blood relation or not. This would naturally extend to your peerage, as they fight for you, serve you, counsel you, and see your ups as well as your downs. Your victories and defeats, the trials and tribulations you go through as a group. It was an important question. Your peerage is your peerage, Rias. I do not believe I have the right to decide what you do with your friends. Despite not being the Gremory heir should you marry me, you would still be Rias Gremory, and as such would retain full discretion in regards to your peerage. This was stated in the same serious manner as previous, but with a great deal of warmth behind it. He would not choose for her, he would not force her to abandon anyone she had chosen as her servant and friend. He would not come between her and her family. Naruto would respect her and her wishes. Rias made up her mind. Rising from her seat on the couch, she swiftly moved to Naruto's right. Coming around the desk, she reached out and took hold of the lapels of his kimono, using them to bring him closer and claim his lips in a passionate kiss. Feeling bold, Rias then decided to up the ante a little and prodded his lips with her tongue, trying to gain entry. In his stunned state, Naruto took a moment to realize what was going on, and when he felt her tongue he reciprocated by adding his own and dueling with hers. Eyeing the kiss momentarily, Rias said, "Then take me as yours, Naruto, and love me as much as I love you." She reclaimed his lips for yet another passion-filled kiss. They stayed like that for several minutes, just kissing, while Rias maneuvered herself to sit on his lap, straddling his legs, even as his hands came around her waist to hold her steady. They seemingly forgot about Makoto, who used the opportunity to quietly leave the room and seal it with silencing and warding spells. She had an idea of what was going to happen, and she wholly approved. After all, one could never have too many harem sisters. Both of them possessed an unnatural charisma, and a heart big enough for the world, while also being capable of putting it all aside when the situation called for it. Yes, they were two of a rare breed of people, leaders. People who were simply born to lead others, and Makoto held no doubt that she would follow them, no matter where they went. Shaking her head to clear her thoughts, her smile flashed full force again, before striding toward the laughing form of Kushina, who was to be found under a dog pile of little bodies. The children saw Makoto approaching and climbed off Kushina, sensing that she had something important to talk about. "Ah, Miko-chan," Kushina called as she sat up in the grass-covered ground. "What brings you out here?" "Oh, nothing much, just thought you'd like to see something that recently came to light," Makoto demurred, trying to ignore the flush of heat between her legs at the sound of her nickname passing Kushina's lips. Lips she was dearly holding back from kissing senseless as she passed Kushina a rolled parchment. Rolling her eyes at Makoto's subtle shenanigans, Kushina opened the parchment to discover a marriage contract. The interesting part to her were the listed participants, Uzumaki Naruto and Rias Gremory. Signed and witnessed by all four of the Mao, along with Lord and Lady Gremory. Slowly, Kushina raised her eyes to Makoto's, a brilliantly joyful smile springing forth. Jumping on the dark-haired woman, Kushina caught her lips in a passionate kiss. A kiss that the children blatantly ignored by looking anywhere but the two beauties who were lip-locked. Pulling away from the kiss, Kushina beamed at Makoto. "This is wonderful news, Miko-chan. Are they doing what I hope they are?" Kushina's exuberance was contagious, if the happy little smile on Makoto's face was any indication. "I believe they are, yes. I left silencing and ward spells on the room so they wouldn't be interrupted." A strange gleam appeared in the raven-haired woman's eye. One Kushina immediately recognized. How could she not, when she saw it so often in her own? Makoto had done something devious. "Oh, Miko-chan, I know that look, what have you done?" Kushina asked with a small giggle. It was rare for Uchiha now Uzumaki Makoto to pull a prank of any kind. Especially on their beloved Naruto. "Oh, nothing, really. I think I might have left a device to record the goings-on of that room behind, though. I should probably not just leave such things laying around." Makoto gave a smirk worthy of an Uzumaki prankster as she said this. Kushina squealed in delight. Oh, Miko-chan. We'll have to review that together later, to make sure there's nothing of a sensitive nature on it. Her voice dropped into a husky whisper as she breathed her idea into the other woman's ear, even as she rubbed her thighs together a little. Oh yes, they simply must watch that later, and maybe get a few ideas on how to tease their king. Maybe a few other things too. The children, having been witness to the conversation, felt it was past time for a tactical retreat, and returned to the inside of the house. Talking between themselves in whispers, they agreed on one thing: adults were weird. As the children ran off into the house, Kushina and Makoto resumed their earlier kiss, eventually leading back to Kushina's room where there was a great deal of moaning. Sure, way to make us all feel bad, Makoto. Naruto and Rias were laying naked upon a spare bed in an adjacent room, just off to one side of the office. This room's purpose? For when Naruto stayed up too long on any given night and needed to crash but didn't feel like trying to stumble his way through the halls. The only ways in were the door that connected to the office, and a small window that was currently closed. It had been several hours since their not-so-little marathon started, and both were feeling tired. As such, they were content to just lay there in each other's arms, just drifting lazily in a sea of post-coital bliss. The room wasn't really big, just enough for a double bed and a small dresser beside it, but at the moment, that didn't matter to the two occupants. They were together, and that was enough. For now, at least. Rias felt more than content. She felt loved like she had always wanted. Not as the Gremory heir, or her peerage's king, but as herself, Rias Gremory. To Naruto she was just her, and that thought brought a satisfied smile to her lips. Seeing the smile, Naruto couldn't help but ask her what it was for. It's because you love me enough to have let me choose, whether to go to you or fight at all. Rias nuzzled her face into the side of his neck, pressing her front into his side. You would have let me go if it was what I wanted, even though it would have meant getting into a contract with someone else. She paused for a moment, basking in the feeling of being loved by a man she loved in return. She knew he had several wives already, but he had a heart that could fit so many, and she knew without a shadow of a doubt that he would never set her aside. He would always make time for her. She was content with that. Besides, she knew of the Uzumaki family's legendary stamina. There was no way in the underworld she would be able to handle him by herself. Just the thought of trying sent a shiver down her spine. If she tried to keep him all to herself, she'd probably never leave the bed again. And as much as he liked the idea of Naruto endlessly ravishing her body, she had the feeling that it might end with her orgasmic death. Not the worst way to go, but she wanted to spend her life with her new husband, not leave him to take care of their children alone. A blush found its way onto her cheeks. Children, hers and Naruto's. Her left hand unconsciously found its way to her belly where she could still feel his seed within her. She had mixed feelings about their sudden coupling. On the one hand, she did not regret it, never, but on the other she realized they had forgotten to use any kind of protection. Rias wasn't sure if she was ready to be a mother just yet. Her own mother had waited centuries before having Sirzechs, and then centuries more before deciding to have Rias. Could a young girl like her really deal with having a baby? She was still in high school. There was so much more for her to experience. The blush had left her by this point. As if sensing her thoughts, Naruto leaned down a little to kiss the tip of her nose. No need to worry, Rias, he said calmly. After Mabui and Hana had come to him not 2 days ago stating they were pregnant, poor Naruto's eyes had bugged out. He had gone to Kushina, trying to figure out why only those two were going to have children, when he had been having almost constantly. Kushina had then explained the functions of the evil peace marks, as she was wont to call them, that she had discovered. First, they acted as filters for his and their desires. Apparently, if the woman with that mark didn't want to get pregnant, his seed was nothing more than thick water. It apparently worked on his end as well. Second, the color scheme indicated how the person in question felt toward him. Pink was completely in love, while red was simply a way of saying, loyal but not interested, you ally. Thank the Mao, the men's marks were all red. It explained why after coupling with Hinata and the others their marks had changed to fully pink. The third, and final, ability of the mark actually made his peerage almost immune to the Uzumaki pheromones. The most he could do to any of them was excite them, increasing their pleasure a little bit. After explaining this to Rias, he went on tracing the swirl now sitting above her heart. This mark on your chest, it works in similar principle. It marks you as mine, just as a start. After that, any and all seed that enters your womb will not take root unless you wish it. To top this off, I knew you might not want a child just yet, so I made sure my own mark, indicating the king on his own chest, was actively suppressing my sperm's potency. Rias sighed in relief. She loved Naruto, but he was right, she didn't want to be a mother just yet. Later though, the blush returned full force, causing her face to become almost the same shade as her hair. His chuckle at her blushing face didn't help, instead just making her blush worse as she smacked his chest. Rias pouted. Stupid Naruto, couldn't a girl dream about her future without him somehow reading her mind? After that though, they devolved into simply talking about their peerages, the hopes and dreams therein, and just what kind of personalities they each had. Eventually though, both of them got up and dressed once more in the clothes they had earlier. As Rias was about to use the transportation circle in the far corner of the office, Naruto stopped her for one last, lingering kiss, before letting her leave in a flash of crimson light. Naruto sighed and returned to his desk. There was always more work to do. As he thought about this, he vaguely remembered the feeling of a spell shattering when Rias left. He figured it must have been a ward spell. Those were incredibly easy to from inside. As this crossed his mind, he recalled that Makoto had been present earlier when Rias and he started their impromptu liaison. He chuckled, the woman must have left it behind when she left the room. Silently thanking Makoto as he sat back down in his very comfortable leather chair, Naruto got back to work. Even he had paperwork, and running a large group of devils and handling the reviews from their accepted contracts was part of his job as king of the peerage. While all of this was happening, back at Training Ground 8, Yugito lay under a tree, looking utterly spent. The woman could barely lift her arms, and was only just managing to hold on to the image of the untouchable Jonin when she dismissed her new students. The moment she had been certain they were out of range, her shoulders slumped and she collapsed to the ground in an exhausted heap. She had called them low Chunin level, lying straight to their faces. She snorted in near hysteric laughter. Low Chunin? More like high Jonin pretending to be genin. She recalled how they had worked together, those hoods hiding their eyes, making it more difficult to read them, and the rest of the cloaks helping them to blend into the forest. Those cloaks were almost unfair. Damn things were surprisingly natural for forest camouflage. Hinata had retreaded into the trees to begin firing arrows at Yugito, while Naruto had drawn that sword of his and attacked at close range, and Tsukiko moved off on yet another tangent to start lobbing ninjutsu at her. Somehow neither of the girls even seemed to come near hitting Naruto, despite how close he was to Yugito at all times. Well, one thing was certain in Yugito's mind. Their stealth skills would scare the shit out of anyone who was not a natural chakra sensor. In her exhausted state, Yugito had crawled over to the shade of one of the trees, and lay down on her back. Closing her eyes, she drifted off into a restless doze. In this sad, she failed to note the other presence that entered the area until they were almost upon her. Suddenly opening her eyes, Yugito gazed up at a very familiar woman in shock. Why is she here?